The earliest known events in Elden Ring's timeline involve the primordial crucible, which predates even the Erd tree, hinting that the Golden Order was never the true beginning, and this single revelation unravels everything players thought they understood about the lands between. What appears at first to be a world ruled by golden light and divine mandate is actually built upon older, stranger foundations, a palimpsest of cosmic forces and forgotten gods whose influence seeps through every crumbling ruin and cryptic item description. The lore of Elden Ring is not a simple tale of heroes and villains, but a vast archaeological puzzle scattered across millennia, where the rise of empires, the betrayal of demigods, the conspiracy of assassins, and the return of the tarnished all form interlocking chapters in a story that begins long before the player ever sets foot in Limgrave. It is a narrative constructed from whispers and fragments, from the memories of spirits and the inscriptions on ancient weapons, from the architecture of divine towers and the mutations of creatures who remember a time before grace. Every boss you face carries the weight of eons. Every region you explore is a graveyard of previous ages, and every ending you can achieve merely adds another layer to a cycle that may have no true conclusion. The Golden Order, for all its grandeur and its claims to eternal truth, is revealed through careful examination to be only one chapter in a much longer and darker saga, a moment of imposed structure in a cosmos that tends toward chaos and fusion and the blending of all things. The shattering, that cataclysmic war between demigods that defines the game's present, was not an aberration, but perhaps an inevitability, the natural result of forces set in motion when the greater will first reached down into this realm, and when Queen Marika first shattered the Elden Ring in an act of rebellion or desperation whose true motives remain obscured by time and conflicting accounts. To understand how the world fell into ruin, you must understand what it was before the ruin, and to understand what it was, you must go back further still, past the age of Marika and Radagon, past the wars of the giants and the dragons, past even the arrival of the Elden Beast, to a time when life itself was different, when all things blended together in the crucible's primordial soup of possibility. This is not merely a story about a video game's plot. It is an exercise in mythological archaeology, a journey through the layers of a fictional history so dense and deliberately obscured that entire communities have spent years excavating its secrets, debating translations of item descriptions, analyzing architectural styles, and constructing elaborate theories about the true nature of the two fingers, the motivations of Rani the Witch, the identity of Melina, and the meaning of the various endings that await those who complete the journey. The theories themselves have become a kind of secondary text, a collective attempt to impose narrative order on a game that resists easy interpretation, and in the quiet hours of night, when the mind seeks both stimulation and rest, these theories offer a unique comfort, a way to drift through a vast and intricate world of ideas without the demand for action or decision. The very structure of Elden Ring's storytelling, fragmented and non-linear, makes it ideal for this kind of contemplative exploration, where you can follow one thread about the origins of the Newman people, then drift into speculation about Marika's true plan, then wander into questions about the nature of death in a world where destined death was sealed away, and then find yourself pondering the symbolism of the Erd tree's roots and whether they represent parasitism or symbiosis. Each theory builds upon the others, creating a lattice of interpretation that is almost as vast as the game world itself, and as you move through them, The boundaries between established lore and speculation begin to blur in a way that mirrors the game's own approach to truth and history. The Night of the Black Knives, for instance, is presented through fragments, through the remembrances of those who were there and the weapons used in the assassination, and from these pieces, players have constructed elaborate timelines of conspiracy involving Ronnie, Marika, the Black Knife assassins, and the stealing of the Rune of Death from Malekith. Was Marika complicit in the death of her own son Godwin? And if so, why? Did Ronnie act alone or as part of a larger plan? What role did the gloam-eyed queen play in the history of destined death? And is there a connection between her defeat and the later events of the Shattering? These questions lead to others, spiraling outward into inquiries about the nature of the outer gods, those cosmic entities that seem to vie for influence over the lands between, each representing a different philosophical and existential threat. The frenzied flame seeks to burn away all division and return everything to primordial unity. The scarlet rot embodies decay and rebirth through corruption. The dark moon suggests hidden knowledge and destiny written in the stars, and the formless mother craves blood and the ecstasy of violence. Against this backdrop of cosmic horror, the struggles of the demigods seem almost petty, yet they are the ones who shape the immediate reality of the world, who hold the great runes that are fragments of the Elden Ring, and whose defeats or alliances determine which ending becomes possible. Godric the Grafted, weakest of the demigods, represents the desperate grasping for power through grotesque augmentation. Renala, once a powerful queen, now sits broken in her library, clutching a false egg and reliving the memory of her lost love. Radon, the mightiest warrior, has been reduced to a mindless beast by the scarlet rot, yet still holds back the stars themselves through sheer force of will even in his degraded state. Rykard has fed himself to a god-devouring serpent in a blasphemous attempt to gain the power to overthrow the gods themselves. Mohg seeks to elevate his cursed blood into a new dynasty through a disturbing union with the Empyrean Miquella. Millennia, Blade of Miquella, and perhaps the most formidable warrior in the lands between, has never known defeat, yet carries within her the scarlet rot that destroyed Caelid and threatens to consume her entirely. And Miquella himself, the most enigmatic of all, who sought to cure his sister's curse and free himself from the influence of outer gods, who grew the Halig tree as an alternative to the Erd tree, and who now sleeps in a cocoon in Mohg's palace, his fate and his plans still unfold. In the beginning, long before the Golden Order, before Queen Marika's ascension, before even the concept of grace as we know it, there existed a time so ancient that its history has been all but erased from the collective memory of the lands between. This is the prehistoric primordial age, an era that scholars and theologians alike refer to in hushed tones as the age of the crucible. To understand the world of Elden Ring, to truly grasp the foundations upon which every subsequent conflict and tragedy was built, we must first journey back to this forgotten epic when life itself took forms that would be considered monstrous by the standards of the Golden Order that would come to dominate the world. The Crucible was not a place, not exactly. Rather, it was a state of being, a primordial wellspring of life energy that represented the original form of what would eventually become the Erd Tree, where the Erd Tree would later stand as a beacon of order, separation, and hierarchy. The Crucible was its opposite in almost every conceivable way. It was chaos given form, a swirling maelstrom of vital energy where all life existed in an undifferentiated, blended state. Imagine, if you will, a cosmic soup where the boundaries between species, between plant and animal, between flesh and scale and feather, simply did not exist in any meaningful way. This was the nature of the crucible, and it was from this primordial source that the first life in the lands between emerged. The beings that arose during this age bore the unmistakable marks of the crucible's chaotic nature. They were creatures of fusion, of amalgamation, possessing traits that would later be segregated into distinct species, but which in this primordial time existed all jumbled together in single organisms. The misbegotten, those tragic figures we encounter throughout the lands between, hunched and twisted with their leonine features and vestigial wings, are living remnants of this era. Their very bodies thus tell the story of the crucible, combining human like intelligence with bestial strength, avian appendages with mammalian musculature. Similarly, the omens, those individuals born with horns and cursed blood, carry within their very DNA the memory of the crucible. What the Golden Order would later deem as curses, as deformities to be hidden away in the sewers beneath Lanedell, were in truth echoes of the world's original state. The horns that sprout from omen bodies, the way their flesh seems to twist and grow in unpredictable patterns, these are not aberrations, but rather throwbacks to a time when such fluid transformation was the norm rather than the exception. But this age of primal chaos was not destined to last forever. Far beyond the lands between, in the cosmic void that exists between worlds and realities, there dwelt entities of immense power, being so vast and incomprehensible that they could only be called outer gods. These entities existed on a plane far removed from mortal understanding, their motivations and desires as alien as their forms. Among these outer gods was one known as the Greater Will, an entity that would come to shape the destiny of the lands between in ways both profound and terrible. The Greater Will looked upon the chaos of the crucible and found it wanting. Where others might have seen vitality and potential, the Greater Will saw only disorder that needed to be tamed, wild energy that needed to be harnessed and directed. To impose its vision of order upon the lands between, the Greater Will required a vassal, an emissary that could carry its will across the vast cosmic distances and establish its dominion over this realm of primordial chaos. The entity it chose, or perhaps created for this purpose, was the Elden Beast, a creature of living gold that embodied the Greater Will's desire for structure and hierarchy. The Elden Beast was not merely a messenger, but a weapon, a tool of cosmic colonization designed to fundamentally reshape the nature of reality in the lands between. When the Greater Will sent the Elden Beast forth from the spaces between stars, it set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate through millennia, that would lead to wars, betrayals, and the shattering of the very order it sought to create. The arrival of the Elden Beast was not a subtle affair. It came as a golden star, a celestial body that streaked across the primordial sky and crashed into the lands between with world-shaking force. Those ancient beings who witnessed this cosmic impact, the creatures of the crucible who had known nothing but the chaotic blending of life, must have looked up in wonder and perhaps terror at this harbinger of change. The golden star was not merely the Elden Beast itself, but also a vessel, a cosmic seed pod that carried within it something of immense significance, the seed of the Erd Tree. This seed was the Greater Will's answer to the crucible, a counterpoint to chaos, a source of ordered growth that would gradually supplant the primordial wellspring. The planting of the Erd Tree's seed marked a turning point in the history of the lands between, though the transformation it heralded would not happen overnight. The seed took root in the land, drawing upon the same vital energies that had fed the crucible but channeling them in new directions, imposing structure where there had been fluidity, creating boundaries where there had been unity. As the new Erd tree began its slow growth, pushing roots deep into the earth and raising branches toward the sky, the crucible began to wane. The primordial wellspring that had given birth to all life in the lands between found itself gradually overshadowed, its chaotic energies being absorbed and transformed by this new, ordered system. The relationship between the crucible and the Erd tree was not one of simple replacement, but rather of transformation and suppression. The Erd tree did not destroy the crucible so much as it contained it, built itself atop it, used its energies while simultaneously denying its essential nature. This transition from the age of the crucible to the age of the Erd tree did not occur without resistance. Many of the beings who had thrived in the primordial chaos, who had known nothing but the fluid, undifferentiated existence of the crucible, looked upon the rising Erd tree with suspicion and hostility. The ancestral followers, those shamanic figures who even in our present time continue to worship at ancient spirit springs and hunt with primitive weapons, are the descendants of these resistors. They clung to the old ways, maintaining their connection to the primal spirits of the land, refusing to bend knee to the new order that the Erd tree represented. In the depths of Seofer River and Einsel River, in those vast underground realms where the light of the Erd tree barely reaches, the ancestral followers built their civilization around the worship of spirits and the hunt, preserving traditions that stretched back to the very dawn of time. Their eternal hunt, their reverence for the great ancestral spirits that take the form of massive, ethereal stags, these practices are living memories of the age of the crucible, when the boundaries between life and death, between flesh and spirit, were far more permeable than they would later become. During this primordial age, before the Erd tree had fully established its dominance, other powers also held sway over the lands between. The dragons, those magnificent and terrible creatures of scale and lightning, emerged as dominant forces in this ancient world. The first dragons were not the diminished, scattered creatures we encounter in our journey, but apex predators and rulers, beings of immense power who commanded the very storms themselves. Gransax, the great ancient dragon whose petrified corpse would later pierce the walls of Leyndell in a failed assault, was among these primordial worms. The dragons built their civilization not on the surface of the lands between, but in the skies, in the floating temple city of Farum Azula, a place that existed outside of normal time, suspended in a perpetual storm. Farum Azula was a marvel of draconic architecture and power, a city of stone and lightning where the ancient dragons gathered and from which they ruled over vast territories below. At the apex of draconic society stood Placidusax, the ancient dragon lord, a being of such immense power that he served as Elden Lord in this time before the Erd tree's dominance. Placidusax possessed not 2 heads, but 5, each one a crown of horns and fangs, each one capable of calling down devastating storms and lightning. His title of Elden Lord suggests that even in this primordial age, there existed some form of the Elden Ring, some cosmic ordering principle that predated the Greater Will's intervention. Placidusax served an outer god, though which one remains a matter of speculation and debate among scholars. Some believe it was the Storm Lord, an entity whose power over wind and lightning was absolute, whose influence can still be felt in the perpetual tempest that surrounds Farum Azula. Others suggest different possibilities, but what is certain is that Placidusax's god, like so many others, eventually fled or abandoned the lands between, leaving the Dragon Lord waiting in eternal vigil for a return that may never come. As the Erd Tree continued its growth and the Greater Will's influence expanded, new mechanisms of control and communication were established. The Fingers, those bizarre emissaries of the Greater Will, began to make their presence known in the lands between. The Two Fingers, those gnarled, towering appendages that would later guide Empyreans and Tarnished alike, started communicating with select beings, establishing the theological and political foundations of what would become the Golden Order. These communications were not simple or straightforward, but rather cryptic, delivered through gestures and interpretations that required dedicated finger readers to translate. Through these strange emissaries, the Greater Will began to identify and elevate certain individuals, preparing the ground for the rise of the demigods who would come to rule in its name. While the Crucible's chaotic energies continued to shape life across the lands between, other powers rose to challenge what would become the Golden Order. In the frozen peaks of the mountain tops of the giants, a civilization of enormous beings had long thrived in worship of their own deity. The fire giants, towering figures with manes of flame-red hair and a single great eye set in their chests, tended the flame of ruin, a sacred fire that burned atop their mountain realm. This flame was no ordinary blaze. It was the manifestation of their god, the Fell God, a destructive outer entity whose power stood in direct opposition to the nascent Golden Order. The fire giants built their society around this eternal flame, constructing massive forges and maintaining the sacred fire that could burn the very foundations of the world itself. Their culture was one of strength and devotion, their warriors wielding enormous weapons, and their shamans channeling the fell god's destructive heat. The giants understood that their flame represented a fundamental threat to any order that might seek to impose itself upon the lands between, for the flame of ruin possessed the unique capability to burn down the Erd Tree itself, should such a tree ever come to exist. This made them natural enemies of the Greater Will's ambitions, even before open conflict erupted. During this same primordial period, another challenge to the Greater Will's designs emerged from an unexpected quarter. An Empyrean, a being chosen as a potential vessel for an outer god, rose to prominence wielding a power that would prove deeply troubling to the cosmic order being established. The Gloam-Eyed Queen, whose true name has been lost to history or deliberately erased, commanded the Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death. This fragment of the Elden Ring governed mortality itself, the natural cycle of life and death that the Greater Will sought to control and manipulate. The Gloam-Eyed Queen was not merely a wielder of death magic. She was an Empyrean chosen by her own two fingers, suggesting that at this early stage, multiple factions within the Greater Will's hierarchy supported different candidates for godhood, or that the cosmic order was less unified than it would later become. Her eyes, described as gloaming or twilight-hued, marked her as something distinct, a being who existed in the liminal space between light and dark, life and death. To enact her will and spread her influence, the Gloam-Eyed Queen created or commanded a fearsome order of assassins known as the Godskin Apostles. These beings were devoted to a practice so horrific it would be remembered with terror even ages later. The Godskin Apostles hunted gods, not merely demigods or powerful beings, but actual gods, the immortal entities that walked the lands between, during this age of divine plurality. When they succeeded in slaying these deities, a feat made possible through their command of destined death, they would perform a gruesome ritual. They flayed the skin from their divine victims, peeling away the godly hide that had housed immortal essence. These divine skins were then stretched, treated, and sewn into garments, robes, and cloaks that the godskin apostles wore as both armor and trophy. The practice served multiple purposes. It was a display of dominance, a way of literally wearing the conquered divinity of their prey. It also granted them protection, as divine skin proved remarkably resilient to harm. Most significantly, it was a theological statement, a declaration that gods were not untouchable, that immortality could be stripped away as easily as skin from flesh. The Godskin apostles developed their own fighting techniques and rituals around this practice. They wielded unique weapons, including the Godslayer's greatsword, a colossal blade imbued with black flames that could slay the divine. Their incantations drew upon black flame, a manifestation of destined death itself, fire that burned with a darkness that consumed not just flesh, but the very concept of immortality. They established temples and ritual sites where they would perform their flaying ceremonies, places that would later be shunned and sealed away. The Godskin Noble and Godskin Apostle variants of these hunters each specialized in different aspects of the hunt, with the nobles representing the aristocracy of this death cult, and the apostles serving as their lean, ascetic warrior priests. Their influence spread across the lands between, and no god could rest easy knowing that the Glomide Queen's servants might be stalking them, waiting for the moment to strike and add another divine pelt to their collection. Far beneath the surface world, another civilization had flourished in defiance of the greater will's cosmic order. The eternal cities, vast underground metropolises carved into enormous caverns, housed a sophisticated culture that had developed in isolation from the surface. Nokron, the eternal city, and its sister city Noxtella, the eternal city of the stars, along with the third settlement, now known only as the nameless Eternal City, represented the pinnacle of the Nox civilization. The Nox were a people who had rejected the greater will's authority entirely, choosing instead to worship the stars and the dark moon. Their architecture reflected this cosmic allegiance, with buildings designed to mimic the night sky, artificial stars set into cavern ceilings to create the illusion of an eternal starlit firmament. They developed advanced technologies and sorceries based on their stellar worship, creating weapons and tools that channeled gravitational forces and cosmic energies. The Nox were master craftsmen and sorcerers, their silver armor and weaponry among the finest ever created. They bred unique creatures in their underground realm, including the massive ant colonies that still inhabit the ruins of their cities, and they practiced forms of magic that drew power from the cosmos itself rather than from the Erd tree or the greater will. Their society was matriarchal, with priestesses and swordstresses holding positions of authority, and they maintained a culture of martial discipline combined with scholarly pursuit. But their greatest ambition, the project that would ultimately seal their fate, was their attempt to create their own lord, a being who could rival the gods chosen by the greater will. To achieve this blasphemous goal, the Nox needed to sever the connection between the greater will and the lands between. They needed to kill a Two Fingers, one of the physical manifestations of the greater will's authority. Through methods that remain mysterious, they succeeded in slaying one of these cosmic emissaries. From the corpse of this Two Fingers, they forged a weapon of unprecedented significance, the Fingerslayer blade. This curved blade of blackened metal, shaped like a twisted spine or a cruel talon, possessed the unique ability to harm the servants of the greater will, to cut through the cosmic authority that protected the two fingers and their chosen Empyreans. With this weapon, the Nox believed they could overthrow the existing order and establish their own lord, a being of their own creation who would rule according to their stellar faith rather than the dictates of an outer god. The greater will's response to this transgression was swift and absolute. The punishment inflicted upon the Nox was so severe it would serve as a warning for all future generations. The greater will sent a falling star, a massive meteor or cosmic projectile that struck the lands between with catastrophic force. This celestial bombardment did not simply destroy the eternal cities. It buried them, collapsing the earth above them and sealing them away in deep underground caverns where they had once thrived beneath open sky. The cities that had built artificial stars to light their realm were plunged into true darkness, cut off from the surface world they had rejected. But the physical destruction was only part of the punishment. The greater will cursed the Nox with what would be remembered as the Age of the Black Moon, a spiritual and cosmic curse that marked them as heretics for all time. Their civilization was shattered, their population scattered or trapped in the ruins of their once great cities. The Nox who survived became a broken people, their grand ambitions reduced to guarding the remnants of their culture in the darkness. The Fingerslayer blade remained, however, hidden away in Nokron, a testament to their defiance and a weapon that would one day be sought by those who would challenge the Golden Order. With the threat of the Eternal Cities neutralized, the Greater Will turned its full attention to establishing its dominion over the surface world. The cosmic entity needed a vessel, an Empyrean who would serve as the living embodiment of its order. The choice fell upon Marika, a member of the Numen race. The Numen were beings who originated from outside the lands between, a people known for their longevity and their connection to the divine. Marika's selection was not random. She possessed the qualities necessary to bear the Elden Ring, the physical manifestation of the greater will's law. As an Empyrean, she had been identified by the Two Fingers as a suitable candidate, but her elevation to godhood required a transformation far more profound than simple selection. The Elden Ring itself, the great rune that contained the fundamental laws governing reality in the lands between, was either forged anew or dramatically reshaped during this pivotal moment. Marika became the vessel for this cosmic artifact, the Elden Ring taking residence within her very body, making her both god and container, ruler and ruled. This fusion of divine being and cosmic law created something unprecedented, a god who was simultaneously the source and the enforcer of order. The Golden Order, the theological and metaphysical system that would govern the lands between for ages to come, was codified through this union. The laws contained within the Elden Ring were no longer abstract cosmic principles, but concrete rules enforced through Marika's divine authority. Death could be controlled, life could be extended indefinitely. The natural chaos of the crucible could be suppressed and refined. The age of primordial mixture would give way to an age of golden purity. But establishing this new order required more than divine proclamation. It required conquest. The ancient powers that had ruled the lands between before Marika's ascension would not yield willingly. Chief among these ancient powers were the dragons, massive reptilian beings who had dominated the skies and mountains since time immemorial. The dragons were not mere beasts. They were intelligent, powerful, and organized under their own hierarchy. They commanded ancient dragon lightning, red gold bolts of pure destructive force that could shatter stone and incinerate armies. Their scales were harder than any armor, their lifespans measured in eons. They had built their own civilization around the principle of strength and dominance, with the mightiest dragons ruling from mountain peaks and claiming vast territories as their domains. The leader of the ancient dragons during this era was Gransax, a dragon of such immense size and power that his very existence posed a direct challenge to Marika's newly established Golden Order. Gransax was not content to remain in the mountains and skies. He led the dragons in an assault on Landel, the capital city that Marika had claimed as the seat of her power. This was not a mere raid or territorial dispute. It was a war for supremacy, a clash between the old order of draconic might and the new order of divine authority. The ancient dragons descended upon Landel in a storm of scales and lightning, their massive forms blotting out the sun as they attacked the walls and towers of the capital. The war between Marika's forces and the ancient dragons raged with terrible intensity. The Golden Order's armies, blessed with holy incantations and wielding weapons consecrated in Marika's name, fought against creatures that had never known defeat. Lightning scarred the earth and buildings. Dragonfire, different from the flame of ruin but no less destructive, consumed entire districts. The conflict tested the very foundations of Marika's claim to supremacy. If she could not defend her capital against the ancient dragons, her golden order would be revealed as hollow, her godhood as insufficient. The turning point came with the fall of Gransax himself. Through means that combined martial prowess, divine intervention, and perhaps treachery or alliance with other dragon factions, the massive dragon was brought down. His death or defeat was so significant that his corpse was not disposed of or hidden away. Instead, it was preserved as a monument to the Golden Order's victory. The enormous body of Gransax, scales still gleaming with residual power, was left where it fell, draped across the walls and buildings of Landel. His massive form became a permanent fixture of the capital's skyline, a corpse so large it served as a bridge and landmark, a constant reminder to all who entered the city that even the mightiest of the ancient powers had fallen before Marika's Golden Order. The age of the Crucible was ending, and the age of the Erd Tree was beginning. In the ancient era known as the Golden Dawn, the lands between stood at the precipice of transformation. The Crucible, that primordial wellspring of life we explored earlier, had nurtured countless forms of existence, but its chaotic nature was about to be challenged by a force from beyond the stars. This period marks perhaps the most consequential turning point in the entire history of the lands between, for it was during this time that the Greater Will, an outer god dwelling in the cosmos beyond mortal comprehension, turned its attention to this realm and set in motion events that would define millennia to come. The Greater Will, unlike the other outer gods that would later vie for influence over the lands between, possessed a vision of absolute order. Where the Crucible celebrated the fusion and mutation of life, the Greater Will sought structure, hierarchy, and eternal stability. To impose its design upon the lands between, this cosmic entity dispatched a golden star that streaked across the heavens, a celestial herald of the new age. Within this star dwelled the Elden Beast, a living incarnation of order itself, a creature of pure golden light that would become the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring. When this golden star struck the earth, It did not destroy, it transformed. The impact sent ripples through the very fabric of reality in the lands between, and from that point of contact, something extraordinary began to occur. The Elden Ring, as it came to be known, was not merely a physical object, but rather a cosmic law made tangible, a set of fundamental rules that governed life, death, causality, and the very nature of existence. It contained within it various great runes, each representing a different aspect of order and reality. The Elden Beast became the living vassal of this ring, dwelling deep within the world itself, waiting for the proper vessel through which the greater will's order could be administered. The arrival of the Elden Ring marked the beginning of the end for the age of the Crucible, though the transition would not be immediate or peaceful. From the site where the golden star had fallen, the Erd tree began its growth. This was not an entirely new creation, but rather a transformation of the crucible itself, or perhaps more accurately, a parasitic overtaking. The Erd tree's roots burrowed deep into the primordial essence of the crucible, drawing upon its boundless life energy while simultaneously suppressing its chaotic nature. Where the crucible had been a melting pot of forms, the Erd tree grew straight and true, its golden boughs reaching toward the heavens in perfect symmetry. Its radiance could be seen from every corner of the lands between, a constant reminder of the new order that was taking root. The tree grew to impossible heights, dwarfing mountains, its golden light washing over the landscape and fundamentally altering the nature of grace itself. No longer would grace be the wild, untamed force of the crucible. It would now flow from the Erd tree in measured, purposeful streams, bestowed upon those deemed worthy by the greater will. Yet the Erd tree and the Elden Ring required a mortal administrator, a god queen who could serve as the intermediary between the cosmic will of the greater will and the inhabitants of the lands between. The greater will chose carefully, selecting from among the new men a mysterious race of beings who had come from beyond the lands between, from a realm or civilization whose nature remains shrouded in mystery to this day. The new men were long-lived, perhaps even immortal by nature, and they possessed an inherent grace that made them ideal candidates for divine ascension. From among the new men, one woman was chosen. Her name was Marika, and she would become Queen Marika the Eternal, the vessel of the Elden Ring itself. The process by which Marika became the host of the Elden Ring is not fully documented, but we know that the Elden Beast, that living incarnation of order, took residence within her very being. She became more than mortal, more than Numen. She became a god in the truest sense, her body housing the fundamental laws of reality. The Elden Ring existed within her, and through her, its power could be wielded and its runes distributed. Marika's transformation was complete. Her golden hair seemed to glow with inner light, and her eyes reflected the wisdom and burden of cosmic law. She established her seat of power in Lendl, which would become the royal capital, a city built in the shadow of the Erd tree itself, where the golden light fell most intensely. To guide Marika in her divine rule, the greater will provided envoys. These were the two fingers, grotesque yet holy beings that served as direct communicators with the outer god. Each set of two fingers acted as a conduit, interpreting the will of the greater will and conveying its desires to Marika, and later to the Tarnished, who would seek to become Elden Lord. The fingers established themselves in sacred locations throughout the lands between, with the most prominent residing in the Round Table Hold, a sanctuary that existed in a space between spaces, accessible to those who carried the grace of the Erd tree. Through the fingers, Marika received her mandates, the suppression of chaos, the establishment of eternal order, and the propagation of the Golden Order as the one true faith of the lands between. But Marika understood that even a god queen could not rule alone, not in a world where strength of arms still held sway over vast territories. She needed a consort, a champion who could enforce the will of the Golden Order through martial might. She found this partner in Godfrey, a warrior of such legendary prowess that his very name inspired fear in the hearts of his enemies. Godfrey was not of noble birth. He had risen through sheer strength and will, a chieftain among warriors, a man who had never known defeat in battle. Marika saw in him the perfect instrument to carve out an empire for the Golden Order, and she took him as her first Elden Lord, granting him a portion of grace and elevating him to stand beside her as the masculine counterpart to her divine feminine authority. The union of Marika and Godfrey was both political and personal. Together they would have children, demigods who carried the blood of a god and the strength of the mightiest warrior in the lands between. But before the domestic concerns of dynasty could take precedence, there was the matter of conquest. The Golden Order, newly founded with Marika as its god and the Erd tree as its central symbol of worship, could not tolerate the existence of rival powers or alternative faiths. The old ways, the worship of the crucible and its chaotic blessings, had to be systematically dismantled and replaced with devotion to the Erd tree and obedience to the Golden Order's laws. The Golden Order began its campaign of religious and cultural suppression with calculated precision. Those aspects of life that had been celebrated under the Crucible's influence, the horns, the wings, the tails, the fusion of different life forms, were now branded as impure, as signs of a primitive and chaotic past that had no place in the new age of order. Creatures that bore the marks of the crucible were labeled as misbegotten, a term that carried both biological and moral condemnation. These beings, who had once been honored as blessed by the primordial life force, now found themselves cast out, enslaved, or hunted. The Crucible Knights, those warriors who had served the Erd tree in its earliest days, when it was still closely tied to the Crucible, found their traditions increasingly marginalized. Their armor, adorned with bestial aspects, became a relic of a bygone era, and while they were not entirely cast out due to their early service, their influence waned as the Golden Order's more rigid interpretation of purity took hold. This suppression was not merely ideological, it was existential. The Golden Order sought to rewrite the very understanding of what was natural and what was aberrant. Scholars and clerics of the Golden Order produced texts and doctrines that codified this new understanding, establishing a hierarchy of being with those who bore pure human or demigod form at the apex, and those who showed signs of the Crucible's influence at the bottom. This ideology would have far-reaching consequences, sowing the seeds of resentment and rebellion that would not fully manifest until much later, but which began in these early days of the Golden Order's ascendance. Yet ideology alone could not secure the Golden Order's dominance. There were powers in the lands between that would not simply acquiesce to Marika's rule, powers that had existed long before the Greater Will turned its gaze upon this realm. Chief among these threats were the Fire Giants, an ancient race of enormous beings who dwelled in the mountain tops of the giants, the highest peaks in the lands between. The Fire Giants were not merely large, they were the keepers of the Flame of Ruin, a primordial fire that burned with such intensity that it could reduce anything to ash, even the Erd tree itself. This flame was anathema to the Golden Order, for it represented a force of destruction that could not be controlled or incorporated into the greater will's design. As long as the flame of ruin burned, the Erd tree's dominance was not absolute. Marika commanded Godfrey to wage war against the fire giants, and thus began one of the most brutal campaigns in the history of the lands between. Godfrey gathered his warriors, men and women who would come to be known as the Tarnished, though they did not yet bear that title. These were the greatest fighters of the age, individuals who had proven themselves in countless battles and who now fought under the banner of the Erd Tree. The war against the giants was not a quick conquest, but a prolonged and savage conflict. The fire giants were formidable opponents, each one possessing the strength of 100 men, and they wielded the flame of ruin with devastating effect. Entire battalions of the Golden Order's forces were incinerated in single blasts of fire, and the mountaintops ran red with blood, both human and giant. Godfrey proved himself worthy of his title as Elden Lord through this campaign. He led from the front, his great axe cleaving through giant flesh, his tactical brilliance turning the tide of battles that seemed lost. The war reigned for years, perhaps even decades, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage until Godfrey employed a strategy of attrition, cutting off the giants' supply lines, isolating their strongholds, and systematically eliminating them one by one. The fire giants, for all their power, were not numerous, and each loss was irreplaceable. Slowly, inexorably, Godfrey's forces ground down the giant civilization until only one remained. The last fire giant was not granted the mercy of death. Marika, in her divine wisdom, or perhaps her divine cruelty, decreed that this final giant would be cursed to tend the very flame he had fought to protect. He would be chained to the forge of the giants, forced to keep the flame of ruin burning, but unable to wield it against the Golden Order. This was a punishment of exquisite psychological torment, to be the eternal guardian of the one weapon that could have saved his people, forever prevented from using it. To ensure that the flame of ruin would never threaten the Erd Tree again, Marika also bound the giant with a curse that tied his life to the flame's continuation. He could not allow it to extinguish, nor could he use it to destroy. The trolls, distant cousins of the fire giants, who had betrayed their larger kin during the war, were set as additional guardians, their own curse being to serve the Golden Order in perpetuity, their faces marked with the shame of their treachery. With the threat of the flame of ruin neutralized, the Golden Order turned its attention to other centers of power. Stormvale Castle, a massive fortress that commanded the approaches to Limgrave, was held by the Stormlord, an ancient entity who commanded the very winds and tempests. The Stormlord's power was such that he could summon hurricanes with a gesture and strike down armies with lightning. Stormvale had never fallen to any invader. Its walls had stood for ages beyond counting, and its master had repelled every challenger. But the Stormlord had not faced the combined might of Marika's divine authority and Godfrey's martial prowess. The campaign against the Stormlord was shorter than the war against the giants, but no less fierce. Godfrey's forces besieged Stormvale, weathering supernatural storms that tore men from the walls and lightning that struck with unerring accuracy. Godfrey himself eventually confronted the Stormlord in single combat atop the highest tower of Stormvale, and though the details of that battle are lost to time, we know that Godfrey emerged victorious. The Stormlord fell, and with him fell the last independent power in Limgrave. Stormvale Castle became a holding of the Golden Order, and Limgrave was brought under Marika's dominion. Yet perhaps the most significant conflict of this era was the war against the ancient dragons. Long before Marika's ascension, the dragons had been the dominant power in the lands between. They were led by Placidusax, the ancient dragon who had himself once been an Elden Lord, in an age so distant that even the dragon's long memories could barely recall it. Placidusax had served a god or gods whose identity remains unknown, outer gods who had either abandoned the lands between or been supplanted by the greater will. When the Erd tree rose and Marika claimed dominion, the dragons saw this as a usurpation of the natural order, and they would not yield without a fight. The dragons had made their seat of power in Lendel itself, or rather, in what would become Lendel, for the city was built atop the ruins of their ancient civilization. The conflict between the Golden Order and the dragons was a war for the very heart of the lands between, a struggle that would determine whether the age of dragons would continue or whether the age of the Erd tree would truly begin. The dragons were beings of immense power, their scales harder than any armor, their breath capable of melting stone, and their mastery of lightning unmatched. Placidusax himself was a creature of godlike might, a dragon with multiple heads, each capable of unleashing devastation. The Golden Order's forces suffered terrible losses in the early engagements, for mortal warriors, no matter how skilled, were ill equipped to face creatures that could take to the sky and rain destruction from above. It was only through the development of specialized dragon hunting techniques and weapons, and perhaps through divine intervention from Marika herself, that the tide began to turn. Godfrey once again proved instrumental, leading daring assaults against dragon roosts and developing tactics that exploited the dragon's few vulnerabilities. The war was long and costly, but eventually the dragons were driven from Lendel. Placidusax, grievously wounded, and his god or gods having abandoned him, retreated to a place beyond time itself, entering a state of dormant meditation where he waits still, dreaming of the return of his lost deity. The remaining dragons scattered, some fleeing to remote peaks, others entering into uneasy truces with the Golden Order, and a few, like the ancient dragon Grandsax, launching desperate final assaults that would be remembered in legend, but which ultimately failed to reverse the dragon's defeat. With these great wars concluded, Godfrey and his warriors had secured the Golden Order's dominance over the lands between. But victory came at a cost that Marika had perhaps foreseen. Godfrey's warriors, tempered in the fires of countless battles, had become too strong, too independent, too much a threat to the eternal order that Marika sought to establish. Moreover, Godfrey himself, that fierce warrior who had been granted grace to become Elden Lord, found that his very nature was changing. The thrill of battle no longer stirred his blood as it once had. A great beast that had dwelt within him, a manifestation of his warrior spirit named Sarosh, had to be placed upon his back as a regent, a controller of his bloodlust. When Godfrey could no longer feel the call to violence, when his purpose as a conqueror was fulfilled and no enemies remained to challenge the Golden Order, Marika made a decision that would echo through the ages. She stripped Godfrey and his warriors of the grace of the Erd tree. The golden light that had shone in their eyes faded, and they became tarnished, beings who had once known grace, but now were bereft of it. Marika exiled them from the lands between, sending them to lands beyond the fog, there to wander, and to war, and to die far from the Erd tree's light. But this exile came with a prophecy that one day, when the Elden Ring was broken and the Golden Order faced its greatest crisis, the Tarnished would be called back, their grace restored, to become champions once more. With Godfrey gone, Marika turned to the final and perhaps most consequential act of this era. The Elden Ring, as it existed within her, contained all the fundamental laws of reality, including the Rune of Death, that aspect of order which governed mortality and the ending of all things. As long as the Rune of Death remained part of the Elden Ring, nothing in the lands between could be truly immortal, not even the gods themselves. But Marika, in her desire to establish an eternal order that would never fade or change, made the decision to remove the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring entirely. This was an act of cosmic surgery, a fundamental alteration of reality itself. She entrusted this most dangerous of runes to Malekith, her shadow-bound half-brother, a being who was both family and servant, bound to her by ancient Numen traditions. Malekith was a warrior of fearsome skill, and he wielded a blade that could contain and control the power of death itself. By removing the Rune of Death and sealing it away with Malekith, Marika ensured that those who lived under the Erd Tree's grace would not die, not truly. They might be killed in battle, but their souls would return to the Erd Tree to be reborn or to dwell in its golden light forever. This was the final pillar of the Golden Order's power, the promise of immortality, the end of death itself. But in removing death from the natural order, Marika set in motion consequences that would ultimately lead to the shattering of everything she had built. Radagon's union with Marika represented more than mere political consolidation. It was an act of metaphysical fusion, two beings occupying a single corporeal form. The exact nature of this merger remains one of the Golden Order's most closely guarded mysteries. Some scholars suggest Radagon was always an aspect of Marika, a masculine projection of her will given independent form. Others argue he was a separate entity who achieved such perfect alignment with the Golden Order's principles that the greater will itself ordained their union. What is certain is that this duality would prove catastrophic. Two wills, two sets of desires, two conflicting purposes bound within one divine flesh. Radagon embodied absolute devotion to the Golden Order, a fundamentalist dedication to law, structure, and the preservation of the existing cosmic hierarchy. Marika, by contrast, had begun to question, to doubt, to see the cracks in the golden facade she had helped construct. Before his final union with Marika, Radagon played a crucial role in expanding the Golden Order's dominion over the lands between. The Carian royal family, rulers of the northern region of Liurnia of the Lakes, represented the last significant resistance to the Erd Tree's supremacy. The Carians were masters of glintstone sorcery, practitioners of magic that drew upon the power of the stars themselves rather than the grace of the Erd Tree. Their Academy of Raya Lucaria stood as a bastion of independent magical study, a tradition that predated the Golden Order and owed it no allegiance. Queen Renala, the Carian matriarch, was a sorceress of unparalleled skill, her mastery of full moon sorcery so complete that she could call down the celestial bodies themselves to crush her enemies. The war between the Golden Order and the Carian royals raged across Liurnia, turning the misty lakes red with blood. Radagon led the Golden Order's campaigns personally, his red hair a banner on the battlefield, his hammer crushing Carian knights beneath its weight. Yet for all his martial prowess, he could not break the Carians through force alone. Renala's magic was too powerful, her forces too well entrenched in the defensible terrain of Liurnia's archipelago. The conflict reached a stalemate, neither side able to claim decisive victory. It was then that Radagon proposed an alternative solution. He would marry Renala, uniting the Golden Order and the Carian royals through matrimony rather than conquest. The offer was accepted. Whether Renala agreed out of political pragmatism, genuine affection for the red haired champion, or simple exhaustion from years of war, the historical record does not clearly indicate. What followed was a period of genuine peace and apparent happiness. Radagon and Renala's union produced three children, each inheriting aspects of both their parents' extraordinary natures. Rani, Radon, and Rykard would each become legendary figures in their own right, demigods who would play pivotal roles in the events surrounding the Shattering. During this time, Radagon seemed content. He studied sorcery under Renala's tutelage, becoming skilled enough in glintstone magic to develop his own spells. He even came to appreciate the intellectual traditions of Raya Lucaria, the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, rather than merely as a tool of conquest. For a time, it appeared that the Golden Order and the Carian legacy might genuinely coexist, that the stars and the Erd Tree might shine together over the lands between. Then came the summons. Marika called Radagon back to Leyndell. The circumstances surrounding this recall remain unclear, but its consequences were devastating. Radagon abandoned Renala without hesitation, his devotion to the Golden Order and to Marika overriding any bonds of affection or duty he had formed in Lornia. He left behind a parting gift, an amber egg of mysterious properties, and departed for the capital. The effect on Renala was catastrophic. The queen who had commanded the full moon, who had led armies and ruled a kingdom, was utterly broken by this abandonment. She retreated into the grand library of Raya Lucaria, clutching the amber egg Radagon had given her, and began an obsessive ritual of rebirth, attempting again and again to recreate what she had lost. Her students, loyal to their queen even in her madness, established a seal around the library, protecting her from the outside world, while she descended deeper into grief-stricken delusion. The Golden Order, meanwhile, continued to refine and expand its theological and bureaucratic apparatus. The two fingers emerged as the primary intermediaries between the greater will and the inhabitants of the lands between. These massive, grotesque appendages, each resembling a pair of enormous fingers sprouting from the ground, were said to read the will of the greater will itself and communicate its desires to the faithful. In practice, the two fingers served as oracles and advisors, their pronouncements shaping Golden Order doctrine and policy. Finger readers, women blessed with the ability to interpret the fingers' subtle movements and to read the fate inscribed in the fingers of ordinary people, spread throughout the realm. The two fingers established themselves in various locations, with the most prominent residing in the Round Table Hold, the gathering place for those who served the Golden Order's interests. These entities claimed direct communion with the greater will, positioning themselves as infallible sources of divine guidance. Yet even as the Golden Order reached the zenith of its power and influence, signs of its fundamental contradictions began to manifest. The Omen Curse appeared, afflicting certain individuals with growths of horns and other features reminiscent of the Crucible's chaotic vitality. In the age before the Erd Tree, such traits would have been celebrated as blessings, marks of the primordial life force. Under the Golden Order's rigid hierarchy, however, they were deemed abominations. The Omen were seen as cursed beings, their very existence a challenge to the perfect, ordered world the Golden Order claimed to have established. Those born with omen traits faced immediate persecution. Common born omen had their horns excised in brutal rituals, often dying from the procedure. Those who survived were frequently killed outright or driven into the margins of society. Noble born omen, whose status provided some protection, were nevertheless imprisoned beneath the capital city of Landel in the subterranean shunning grounds, hidden away from public view. The most tragic victims of this prejudice were Morgott and Mog, twin sons born to Queen Marika herself. That the Divine Queen, the vessel of the Elden Ring and avatar of the Golden Order, could produce omen offspring was a scandal of the highest magnitude. It suggested that even the gods themselves were not immune to the Crucible's lingering influence, that the Golden Order's claims of perfect divine order were fundamentally flawed. Rather than acknowledge this uncomfortable truth, Marika and the Golden Order chose concealment. The twins were hidden beneath Landel, imprisoned in the sewers and catacombs that lay beneath the capital's golden streets. There they would remain, growing to adulthood in darkness, their existence a shameful secret known only to the highest echelons of the Golden Order's hierarchy. The contradictions within the Golden Order, the tensions between Marika and Radagon, the suppressed truths and hidden shames, all built toward an inevitable crisis. That crisis arrived with the Night of the Black Knives, an event that would shatter the Golden Order's claim to eternal stability and set in motion the catastrophic chain of events known as the Shattering. The architect of this night was Rani the Witch, daughter of Radagon and Renala, an Empyrean in her own right with her own designs on the future of the lands between. Rani had been chosen by the Two Fingers as a potential successor to Marika, a vessel who might one day bear the Elden Ring. She rejected this destiny utterly, seeking instead to free herself and the world from the Greater Will's influence entirely. To achieve her liberation, Rani orchestrated an elaborate and terrible plot. She required death, true death, to sever her connection to her Empyrean flesh and the fate the Two Fingers had ordained for her. But death as such had been sealed away, locked within Malekith's black blade at Marika's command. Rani conspired with others, their identities still debated among scholars, to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith himself. This was an act of staggering audacity and skill. Malekith, Marika's own shadow and the most fearsome warrior in the lands between, was not easily deceived or overcome. Yet somehow, a fragment of destined death was taken from him, removed from the black blade that had contained it for ages. With this fragment, Rani forged the Black Knives, weapons imbued with the power of destined death, capable of killing even gods. She then enlisted the aid of the Black Knife Assassins, a group of Numen women, members of Marika's own race, trained in the arts of stealth and murder. On the appointed night, these assassins struck across the lands between, their primary target being Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn son and the Golden Order's greatest champion. Godwyn was everything the Golden Order claimed to represent. He was noble, powerful, beloved by the people, a warrior who had befriended even dragons, forging peace with the ancient Drake Fortisex. His death would be a wound from which the Golden Order could never recover. The assassins found Godwyn in the capital and struck him down with their cursed blades. But Rani's ritual was more complex than simple murder. She had prepared a mechanism by which two deaths would occur simultaneously, the stolen rune of death split between two targets. As Godwyn's soul was slain, Rani's own body died, her flesh perishing while her soul endured. The result was a twisted half-death for both. Godwin's soul perished, journeying beyond the reach of the Erd tree, but his body lived on, transformed into something horrible. He became the Prince of Death, the first of those who live in death, his corrupted flesh spreading a blight called Deathroot throughout the lands between. Everywhere his influence reached, the dead began to rise, not as spirits returning to the Erd tree, but as undead abominations, their souls trapped in rotting flesh, denied both true life and true death. Marika's response to Godwin's death was cataclysmic. The loss of her beloved son, combined with whatever doubts and resentments she had accumulated over the long ages of her reign, drove her to an act of ultimate defiance. She took up her hammer and shattered the Elden Ring itself. The symbol and source of the Golden Order's power, the fundamental pattern that structured reality in the lands between, was broken into fragments. This was not an act of madness, but of deliberate rebellion. Marika had come to see the Golden Order as a prison, the greater will as a tyrant, and she chose to break the system rather than continue to serve it. The exact motivations behind her decision remain subject to interpretation. Some believe she sought to free the lands between from the greater will's control. Others suggest she acted out of grief and rage, lashing out at the cosmic order that had failed to protect her son. Still others propose she had planned this moment for centuries, using the Golden Order to consolidate power before ultimately destroying it. Radagon, the other half of Marika's being, opposed her action with equal fervor. Where Marika sought to destroy, Radagon sought to preserve. He attempted to repair the Elden Ring, to restore the shattered fragments to wholeness, and return the Golden Order to its former glory. But the damage was too severe, the fractures too deep. Despite his desperate efforts, despite his mastery of both faith and sorcery, despite his absolute devotion to the Golden Order's principles, Radagon failed. The Elden Ring remained broken, its great runes scattered among Marika's demigod children, each claiming a fragment of divine power for themselves. The greater will, confronted with the rebellion of its own chosen vessel, responded with divine judgment. Marika, and by extension Radagon, was imprisoned within the Erd tree itself, crucified upon the ruins of the Elden Ring. The two beings, locked in their eternal struggle, one seeking destruction and the other restoration, were pinned in place, unable to complete either goal. The Erd tree, once a symbol of grace and divine favor, became a prison for the gods themselves. Its golden light continued to shine across the lands between, but no more grace flowed from it to guide the faithful. The age of plenty had ended, replaced by an age of conflict and decay. Within the Erd tree, alongside the imprisoned Marika and Radagon, dwelt the Elden Beast, the living incarnation of the Elden Ring itself. This entity was the greater will's direct agent, the physical manifestation of the cosmic order it sought to impose upon the lands between. The Elden Beast had arrived in ages past as a golden star, carrying the Elden Ring to this world, and it remained as the ultimate enforcer of the greater will's dominion. With Marika's rebellion and the ring's shattering, the Elden Beast became the final arbiter of the Golden Order's will, the last guardian of the fractured cosmic order. The two fingers, who had served as intermediaries between the greater will and the people of the lands between, found themselves suddenly isolated. Their communion with the greater will, never as direct or clear as they had claimed, ceased entirely. The guidance they had provided, The certainties they had proclaimed were revealed as interpretations rather than absolute truths. Yet the fingers continued to fulfill their function, advising those who sought the Elden Ring's restoration, directing tarnished warriors on their quest to become Elden Lord. Whether they acted on lingering instructions, their own understanding of the greater will's desires, or simply from institutional inertia, they remained a force shaping events in the lands between. The shattering of the Elden Ring precipitated immediate and catastrophic consequences. Marika's demigod children, each bearing a fragment of the broken ring, went to war with one another. Each sought to claim enough great runes to restore the Elden Ring under their own authority, to become the next Elden Lord and reshape the lands between according to their own vision. This conflict, known simply as the Shattering, would rage for ages, turning the once prosperous realm into a landscape of endless war. The Golden Order, which had promised eternal peace and prosperity under divine rule, had instead delivered an apocalyptic civil war among gods. And in the depths of this chaos, the tarnished, those who had been exiled from the lands between and stripped of the Erd Tree's grace, began to hear a call. Grace, long denied them, flickered back to life in their eyes, guiding them back to the lands between with a purpose, to claim the great runes, challenge the demigods, and restore the Elden Ring. The age of the tarnished had begun, and so, as the Golden Order solidified its dominion, we arrive at the precipice of its decline, the era we've designated as the pre-shattering period. This is where the seeds of destruction, sown in the very foundation of Marika's reign, begin to bear their bitter fruit, ultimately leading to the cataclysmic event that defines the lands between as we know them. Our journey through this pivotal era begins with a seemingly benevolent act that would ironically set the stage for unimaginable suffering. Queen Marika, the Eternal, in a move that cemented the Golden Order's promise of everlasting prosperity, removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring. This singular act, a deliberate manipulation of the fundamental laws of existence, granted the lands between an unnatural immortality. No longer could beings truly die. Their souls would simply return to the Erd Tree, a cycle of rebirth that on the surface appeared to be a blessing. However, this suppression of true death, this denial of the natural order, would fester, creating an imbalance that would eventually erupt with devastating consequences. With the promise of eternal life, or at least eternal return firmly established, Marika's vision for a unified lands between under the Golden Order could truly take shape. She appointed her consort Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, a fearsome warrior and a paragon of strength, to lead her armies. Under Godfrey's command, a relentless campaign of conquest swept across the continent. Tribe after tribe, kingdom after kingdom, fell before the might of the Golden Order's forces. From the ancient Crucible Knights, infused with the primordial power of life itself, to the countless foot soldiers loyal to the Erd Tree, Godfrey's legions were unstoppable. The aim was clear: to bring all peoples and lands under the benevolent yet unyielding sway of the Golden Order, to extend Marika's divine influence to every corner of the world. This period of expansion, though marked by warfare, was framed as a necessary step towards a golden age, a unification under a single divine authority. One of the most significant conflicts during Godfrey's campaigns was the war against the giants. These colossal beings, inhabitants of the mountaintops of the giants, worshipped a fell god and harbored a destructive power known as the Flame of Ruin. This flame, an antithesis to the Golden Order's light, represented a primal force of destruction, capable of incinerating the Erdtree itself. Godfrey, leading his forces deep into the treacherous snowy peaks, confronted the giants in a brutal, protracted war. Ultimately, Godfrey emerged victorious, but the flame of ruin proved too potent to be extinguished entirely. Instead, it was sealed away, entrusted to the last surviving fire giant, a solitary guardian condemned to tend the flame for eternity. This act, a compromise rather than a definitive victory, left a lingering threat, a smoldering ember that would one day reignite. The sealing of the flame of ruin, while preventing immediate catastrophe, also demonstrated the limits of the Golden Order's power, hinting at forces beyond its complete control. Following the unification of the lands between, and with no more foes to conquer, Godfrey and his warriors began to experience a profound shift. The guidance of grace, the golden light emanating from the Erdtree that had propelled them to victory, began to fade. This divine favor, once a constant companion, now receded, leaving them adrift. Marika, ever pragmatic and perhaps sensing a new phase for her empire, saw this as an opportunity. She exiled Godfrey and his loyal warriors, sending them beyond the lands between to wage war in foreign lands. These exiled warriors, stripped of their grace and their homeland, would eventually become known as the Tarnished, a name that would echo through history. This exile was not merely a punishment, but a strategic maneuver. Marika, in her inscrutable wisdom, believed that by sending them away, they would grow stronger, tempered by hardship, and perhaps one day return, not as conquerors, but as saviors. This act, however, was also a deeply personal betrayal, severing ties with her first Elden Lord and setting him on a path of endless struggle. With Godfrey banished, Marika needed a new consort, a new Elden Lord to stand beside her and maintain the Golden Order's authority. She chose Radagon, a champion of the Golden Order, a figure of immense power and unwavering devotion. Radagon, a mysterious and enigmatic character, ascended to become the second Elden Lord, solidifying his place at the pinnacle of Marika's reign. This union, however, was not one of simple love or political expediency. It was a deeper, more complex affair, intertwined with the very fabric of the Elden Ring itself. Indeed, Radagon and Marika's union was not without its profound difficulties, particularly as the Elden Ring itself began to show signs of internal stress. The ring, the very embodiment of the Golden Order's principles, was fracturing. Whether these fractures were a direct consequence of Marika's removal of the Rune of Death, the relentless expansion of the Golden Order, or something far more ancient and insidious, remains a subject of intense debate among scholars of the lands between. Regardless of the cause, Radagon and Marika dedicated themselves to repairing these fissures, to mending the divine order they represented. Yet their efforts were marked by tension and duality. Radagon, a staunch believer in the Golden Order's absolute truth, and Marika, whose actions increasingly hinted at a hidden agenda, often found themselves at odds. This internal conflict within the Elden Lords themselves mirrored the growing instability within the Elden Ring, suggesting a fundamental disharmony at the heart of their shared power. Their attempts to mend the ring were not a harmonious collaboration, but rather a strained, almost desperate effort to hold together a crumbling edifice, a testament to the growing cracks, not just in the Elden Ring, but in the very foundations of the Golden Order. As the Golden Order grappled with its internal struggles, another older power faced the wrath of the Greater Will. The Nox of the Eternal Cities, an ancient civilization that had once thrived beneath the earth, had dared to defy the greater will. Their transgression, though shrouded in the mists of time, involved the creation of artificial life, specifically the mimic tears, beings capable of perfectly imitating others. This act, seen as a blasphemous imitation of divine creation, drew the ire of the greater will. As punishment, the greater will unleashed its power upon the eternal cities, causing them to be buried deep underground. This cataclysmic event, a divine judgment of immense scale, serves as a stark reminder of the greater will's absolute authority and its willingness to enforce its will with devastating force. The buried cities, now silent and forgotten, became a testament to the perils of defying the cosmic order, a chilling warning to any who would challenge the dominion of the outer gods. Amidst these growing tensions and divine punishments, a shadowy plot began to unfold, orchestrated by Rani the Witch, daughter of Radagon and Renala, and thus a demigod of immense power. Rani, an Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers to potentially succeed Marika, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards her destiny. She sought to escape the influence of the greater will and the suffocating expectations placed upon her. To achieve this, Rani orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives, a clandestine operation of unparalleled audacity. Her goal was to kill her Empyrean flesh, thereby severing her ties to the Two Fingers and freeing herself from their control. To accomplish this, she needed a fragment of the Rune of Death, the very power Marika had removed from the Elden Ring. Through means still debated by scholars, Rani managed to acquire this forbidden power. The Night of the Black Knives was a night of terror and unparalleled consequence. The assassins of the Black Knife, shadowy figures rumored to be new men like Marika herself, were dispatched to carry out Rani's dark bidding. Their target, however, was not Rani herself, but Godwyn the Golden, Marika's favored son and a paragon of the Golden Order. The assassins, wielding blades imbued with the stolen Rune of Death, struck Godwyn down, marking the first true death in the lands between since Marika had removed the Rune of Death. This act was not merely murder, it was a profound violation of the Golden Order's foundational principle of immortality. The death of Godwyn, a beloved figure, sent shockwaves through the lands between, shattering the illusion of eternal life and exposing the vulnerability of even the most divine beings. But the horror did not end there. Godwyn's death was not complete. The fragment of the Rune of Death, while powerful enough to slay his body, was not sufficient to fully extinguish his soul. This incomplete death, a perverse twist of fate, corrupted Godwyn's form, transforming him into the grotesque Prince of Death. From his decaying corpse, nestled deep within the roots of the Unanswered tree, a blight began to spread, Deathroot. This insidious corruption, a manifestation of true death, began to infect the very foundation of the lands between, twisting life into grotesque forms and spreading despair. Godwyn, once the golden hope of the Golden Order, became its darkest stain, a living testament to the catastrophic consequences of tampering with the natural order of life and death. His suffering became the suffering of the land, a creeping decay that foreshadowed the coming apocalypse. Marika, witnessing the horrific fate of her beloved son and the desecration of the Golden Order's core tenets, was driven to the brink. Her grief, coupled with a growing defiance towards the greater will, reached a breaking point. In an act of unparalleled rebellion, Marika shattered the Elden Ring. This cataclysmic event, an explosion of divine power, ripped apart the very fabric of reality, sending shards of the Elden Ring, known as Great Runes, scattering across the lands between. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate, furious act of defiance against the greater will, a desperate attempt to break free from its suffocating control, to dismantle the very system she had helped create. The shattering of the Elden Ring was the ultimate act of self immolation, a desperate gamble with the fate of an entire world. The greater will, enraged by Marika's transgression, abandoned her. Its golden guidance, once a constant presence, vanished, leaving the lands between adrift. As punishment for her defiance, Marika was imprisoned within the very heart of the Erd Tree, her broken form bound by the golden light she once commanded. This imprisonment was not merely a physical confinement, it was a spiritual agony, a living death for the former goddess, a stark warning to any who would dare to challenge the cosmic order. The greater will, having exerted its dominion, left the lands between to descend into chaos, a testament to its wrath and the profound consequences of defying its will. With the Elden Ring shattered and Marika imprisoned, a power vacuum of immense proportions emerged. The demigods, Marika's children and stepchildren, each possessing a claim to divine lineage, scrambled to seize control. They gathered the scattered fragments of the shattered Elden Ring, the great runes, each believing themselves destined to become the new Elden Lord. This desperate scramble for power ignited the Shattering War, a brutal fratricidal conflict that plunged the lands between into an age of unending bloodshed. Each demigod, driven by ambition and a twisted sense of destiny, waged war against their siblings, seeking to claim ultimate dominion and reforge the Elden Ring in their own image. The once unified lands between devolved into a battleground, a testament to the destructive nature of unchecked power and familial strife. Among these warring demigods was General Radon, son of Radagon and Renala, a formidable warrior of immense stature and power. Radon, driven by a complex mix of ambition, loyalty, and perhaps a touch of love for his half-sister Rani, claimed a great rune and mastered the art of gravity magic. His mastery was so profound that he was able to halt the very stars in their courses. This monumental feat, a defiance of cosmic law, was not merely a display of power. It was a deliberate act to prevent Rani's fate from progressing. Rani, having shed her physical body, was now bound to the stars, her destiny intertwined with their movements. By freezing the celestial bodies, Radon effectively put Rani's fate on hold, preventing her from fully enacting her plan, whatever it may have been. This act, while seemingly protective, also trapped Rani in a liminal state, forever bound to the frozen cosmos, a prisoner of her brother's immense power. This monumental feat, a defiance of cosmic law, was not merely a display of power. It was a deliberate act to prevent Rani's fate from progressing. Rani, having shed her physical body, was now bound to the stars, her destiny intertwined with their movements. By freezing the celestial bodies, Radon effectively put Rani's fate on hold, preventing her from fully enacting her plan, whatever it may have been. This act, while seemingly protective, also trapped Rani in a liminal state, forever bound to the frozen cosmos, a prisoner of her brother's immense power. The implications of this cosmic intervention were vast, further destabilizing the already fractured reality of the lands between and hinting at a deeper, more intricate web of divine machinations at play. The stage was now set for the devastating conflicts that would define the Shattering War, a war that would forever scar the lands between and lay the groundwork for the arrival of the Tarnished. Rykard, ever the contrarian, chose a path of outright blasphemy. Born of Radagon and Renala, making him a demigod of considerable power and intellect, he found the Golden Order's rigid dogma and its imposed hierarchy utterly stifling. His rebellion wasn't merely political, it was existential. He sought to transcend the very concept of godhood as defined by the greater will, believing it to be a tyrannical force that stifled true potential and freedom. His defiance culminated in a horrifying act. He allowed himself to be devoured by the god-devouring serpent, an ancient or primordial entity lurking beneath Mount Gelmir. This wasn't a suicide, but a macabre fusion, a merging of wills and flesh. Rykard, now one with the serpent, became a grotesque, immortal entity, perpetually consuming and growing. His goal was to devour the very gods themselves, to absorb their power and dismantle the Golden Order from within. He established Volcano Manor, a haven for those who, like him, harbored a deep-seated hatred for the Erd Tree and its dominion. There, he offered a perverse form of family to tarnished and demigods alike, inviting them to join his hunt for the gods, to become part of his ever-growing, blasphemous flesh. His actions, while deeply disturbing, represented a radical break from the established order, a desperate attempt to forge a new reality, free from the greater will's oppressive influence. He saw the Golden Order as a decaying husk, and his consumption was merely an acceleration of its inevitable demise. This act of self-sacrifice, or perhaps self-annihilation, cemented his place as the Lord of Blasphemy, a terrifying figure whose very existence was a direct affront to the cosmic powers that governed the lands between. The constant gnawing and assimilation of the serpent became his new form of being, a perpetual state of rebellion. Meanwhile, amidst this chaos, stood Morgoth the Grace-Given, the veiled Omen King. A son of Marika and Godfrey, he was born an Omen, a cursed being with horns and scales, traditionally seen as an affront to the Golden Order. Despite this, Morgoth harbored a profound, almost tragic loyalty to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order that had condemned him. He was a paradox, a protector of the very system that reviled him. While other demigods engaged in open warfare, Morgoth remained in Leyndell, the royal capital, defending it fiercely against all challengers. He fought not for personal power, but to uphold the illusion of the Golden Order's continued reign, to maintain a semblance of stability in a world tearing itself apart. His battles were often solitary, his identity as an omen hidden beneath his regal attire, for he knew that revealing his true nature would shatter the fragile peace he desperately sought to preserve. He was the unsung guardian, the loyal son cast aside, yet still devoted. His motivations were complex, driven by a deep-seated love for his mother, Marika, and a belief that the Golden Order, despite its flaws, was the only thing holding the lands between together. He saw the other demigods as selfish, power-hungry individuals who would only hasten the world's destruction. His unwavering defense of Leyndell against his own kin was a testament to his tragic devotion, a silent sacrifice for a world that would never truly accept him. He was the last bastion of a dying order, a king who ruled in shadow, his heart heavy with the weight of a broken realm. But even as Morgoth fought to preserve the old order, new threats emerged from its shadows. Maug, the Lord of Blood, another omen born of Marika and Godfrey, harbored a far more insidious ambition than his brother. Unlike Morgoth, Maug embraced his cursed bloodline, finding power and purpose in the forbidden. He became a devotee of the Formless Mother, an outer god associated with blood and primordial chaos, a cosmic entity that existed beyond the purview of the greater will. Driven by the formless mother's whispers, Mog orchestrated a daring abduction. He stole Makela, the unalloyed Empyrean, from his cocoon within the halig tree. Makela, who had retreated into his chrysalis to find a cure for millennia's scarlet rot and to achieve his own ascension, was vulnerable. Mog saw in Makela not just an Empyrean, but a vessel, a potential god for a new, blood-soaked dynasty. His plan was to nurture Makela, to corrupt him with the formless mother's influence, and to raise him as a god of his own making, ushering in an age of blood. This act was a profound violation, a desecration of Makela's pure, unalloyed nature, and a direct challenge to the Golden Order's very foundations. Mog established his hidden palace, Mogwin Dynasty Mausoleum, deep within the subterranean depths, a place where he could perform his dark rituals and prepare Makela for his unholy ascension. His actions represented a complete rejection of the existing cosmic order, a desire to forge a new reality built on blood and primordial power, under the guidance of an outer god far more ancient and terrifying than the greater will. As the shattering plunged the lands between into deepening despair, a final, desperate gambit was set in motion. Marika, imprisoned within the Erd tree, her will shattered but not entirely broken, issued a final decree. Her grace, which had been stripped from the Tarnished long ago, was restored. The Tarnished, individuals who had been exiled from the lands between for various reasons, often for lacking the golden light in their eyes that signified the blessing of the Erd tree, were now called back. Their purpose was clear: to contest the demigods, to gather the great runes, and to reclaim the Elden Ring, thereby becoming the new Elden Lord. This was Marika's last hope, a desperate attempt to mend the fractured world, even if it meant unleashing further conflict. The Tarnished were her chosen instruments, outsiders who, by their very nature, were free from the corrupting influence of the Golden Order's decay. They were meant to be the agents of change, the ones who would either restore the old order or usher in a new one. Simultaneously, the two fingers, enigmatic envoys of the greater will, also stirred. These colossal, ancient entities, residing in various divine towers across the lands between, served as intermediaries between the outer god and the inhabitants of the world. They communicated through their finger reader crones, translating their cosmic pronouncements into understandable language. The two fingers, observing the escalating chaos and the Golden Order's weakening grip, instructed the newly returned Tarnished to slay the demigods and reclaim their great runes. This directive, while seemingly aligned with Marika's, carried a different underlying agenda. The greater will sought to reassert its dominance, to eliminate the rebellious demigods who had fractured the Elden Ring, and to install a new Elden Lord who would faithfully serve its cosmic will. The Tarnished, therefore, became pawns in a cosmic struggle, their actions guided by both Marika's desperate hope and the greater will's desire for control. The great runes, fragments of the shattered Elden Ring, were not merely symbols of power. They were essential components, each imbued with a specific aspect of the world's governing principles. Gathering them was not just about strength, but about reassembling the very fabric of reality. To aid these returning Tarnished, a sanctuary was established, the Round Table Hold. This ethereal, non-physical space existed outside the normal flow of time and space, accessible only through specific grace sites. It served as a gathering place, a nexus for the Tarnished to rest, strategize, and learn. Within its hallowed halls, the Tarnished found guidance from various figures. Finger reader Enya, one of the crones serving the two fingers, interpreted their cryptic pronouncements and offered insights into the demigods and their great runes. More surprisingly, the spectral remains of Hugh, a smith from Marika's era, also resided there. Hugh, bound by an ancient oath to Marika, tirelessly forged and upgraded weapons for the Tarnished, believing that one day one of them would become Elden Lord and free him from his eternal servitude. The Round Table Hold became a symbol of hope and a practical necessity for the Tarnished, a place where they could prepare for the monumental task ahead, a brief respite from the harsh realities of the lands between. It was a testament to the enduring power of grace, even in a world devoid of it, a place where the embers of hope could still be fanned. Among the Tarnished who returned was a figure of legendary renown, Godfrey, Marika's first consort and the original Elden Lord. Stripped of his grace and exiled long ago, he had roamed the Badlands, a harsh, unforgiving land beyond the reach of the Erd Tree. There he had shed his regal title, embracing the ferocity of a warrior, becoming Huara Lu, chieftain of the Badlands. His return was not a matter of choice, but of destiny, a primal urge to reclaim what was once his. He was a true Tarnished, having lost the golden light in his eyes, yet his spirit remained indomitable. His journey back to the lands between was a testament to his immense strength and his unwavering ambition. He sought to reclaim his title as Elden Lord, not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated desire to fulfill his destiny and to restore the Golden Order to its former glory, or at least to what he believed it should be. His return added another layer of complexity to the already fractured political landscape, as a former Elden Lord now vied for the same prize as the newly resurrected Tarnished. He represented the Old Guard, a powerful force that could either aid or hinder the player's progress, depending on the choices made. However, even if a Tarnished managed to gather all the great runes, a formidable obstacle remained: the Erd Tree's thorns. These colossal and impenetrable brambles, imbued with the power of the Erd Tree itself, completely barred entry to its sacred interior where the Elden Ring lay. They were a final, desperate defense mechanism, a manifestation of the Erd Tree's decaying will. The only way to bypass them was to unleash the Rune of Death, a forbidden power that had been sealed away by Marika herself. The Rune of Death, once part of the Elden Ring, represented the concept of true death, the finality that had been removed from the lands between. To burn the thorns, one would need to wield this destructive power, an act that would undoubtedly have profound and irreversible consequences for the world. This necessity forced the Tarnished to seek out the source of the Rune of Death, leading them on a perilous journey to the hidden depths of the lands between, a journey that would inevitably involve confronting ancient powers and unsettling truths about the nature of life and death in this world. Amidst the overt conflicts and the desperate struggle for the Elden Ring, a more subtle, long-term plot unfolded, guided by the enigmatic Empyrean Ranni. Daughter of Radagon and Renala, Ranni had rejected her destiny as an Empyrean, and through a complex ritual involving the Rune of Death, had cast off her corporeal form, existing as a spectral doll. Her goal was to usher in an age of stars, an era free from the influence of the Greater Will and its oppressive Golden Order. She believed that the Greater Will's constant interference had stunted the growth and freedom of the lands between, and that true autonomy could only be achieved by removing its influence entirely. Ronnie subtly guided the Tarnished, providing them with cryptic clues and leading them down a path that would ultimately allow them to choose her Age of Stars ending. Her plot was a carefully orchestrated rebellion, a quiet revolution against the cosmic order, utilizing the Tarnished as her unwitting agents. She sought to replace the Golden Order with a new cosmic order, one based on the cold, distant wisdom of the stars, where free will and individual destiny could truly flourish. Her motivations were complex, driven by a desire for liberation, not just for herself, but for all the inhabitants of the lands between. But not all sought liberation or restoration. Some, like the grotesque Dung Eater, sought only defilement and despair. The Dung Eater, a notorious serial killer and a harbinger of a terrible curse, actively sought to spread the curse of the omen, to infect all life with its grotesque deformities. He believed that the Golden Order's obsession with purity and its rejection of the omen was a fundamental flaw, and that by spreading this curse, he could defile the very essence of the Erd Tree and its dominion. His goal was to usher in an age of the Fell Curse, an ending where all life would be blighted, twisted, and eternally damned, a perverse form of equality born from universal suffering. He was a nihilistic figure, driven by a deep-seated hatred for the established order and a desire to see all things reduced to a state of abject misery. His actions were a direct affront to the Golden Order's ideals of beauty and perfection, a terrifying manifestation of the world's decay. In stark contrast to the Dung Eater's destructive ambition, Fia, the deathbed companion, pursued a path of mournful restoration. Fia, a mysterious woman who offered comfort to the Tarnished, harbored a secret agenda to restore Godwin's legacy. Godwin the Golden, Marika's firstborn son, had been the first demigod to die, his soul slain but his body left intact, leading to the spread of the death blight across the lands between. Fia believed that Godwin's incomplete death was a source of great imbalance and suffering. She sought to mend the fractured concept of death by spreading the mending rune of the Death Prince, a rune that would allow for a complete and true death, thereby restoring balance to the world and freeing Godwin's tormented soul. Her actions, while seemingly benevolent, were controversial, as they involved tampering with the very fabric of life and death, an act that many considered blasphemous. She represented a different approach to dealing with the world's brokenness, one rooted in compassion and a desire to heal the wounds of the past, even if it meant challenging established beliefs. Ultimately, after navigating the treacherous landscape of the lands between, confronting the various demigods, and gathering the great runes, the Tarnished would face their final challenge, the Elden Beast. This colossal, ethereal entity was not merely a creature, but the physical manifestation of the greater will's power, its vassal, and its ultimate guardian. It resided within the Erd Tree, a cosmic horror that represented the very cosmic order that had governed the lands between for eons. The confrontation with the Elden Beast was the culmination of the Tarnished's journey, the ultimate test of their strength and their will. It was here that the fate of the lands between would be decided, where the Tarnished would either succumb to the greater will's immense power or emerge victorious, capable of choosing a new path for the fractured world. The battle was not just against a beast, but against a cosmic ideology, a struggle for the very soul of the lands between, a final, epic confrontation that would determine the future of all existence in this desolate yet beautiful realm. Previous section fades out. And so we arrive at the fourth major entry in our sprawling timeline, a period of immense upheaval and desperate hope, the age of the Tarnished. This era, firmly rooted in the post shattering chaos, marks a pivotal turning point, the moment when the very fabric of the lands between began to fray and paradoxically offered a glimmer of potential renewal. For centuries, the lands between had languished under the oppressive stasis of Marika's absence and the warring demigods. The Greater Will, the enigmatic outer god that had once bestowed the Elden Ring upon Marika, now sought to mend its broken creation. Its solution, born of desperation or perhaps a long term plan, was to recall those who had once been exiled, the Tarnished. These were individuals who, for various reasons, had been stripped of the Erdtree's grace and cast out of the lands between in ages past. Now, their time had come. The grace of the Erdtree, that golden light which guides champions, stirred within these forgotten exiles once more, drawing them across the treacherous fog-shrouded seas. Many tarnished, like you, awoke in the desolate confines of the Chapel of Anticipation, a crumbling edifice clinging to the edge of the known world. It was here, in this liminal space between the old world and the new, that the spectral figure of Melina first appeared. A mysterious maiden, her left eye sealed, she offered a pact. She would act as your finger maiden, lending you her strength to convert runes into power if you would guide her to the foot of the Erdtree. Her motives, however, remained shrouded in an alluring ambiguity, hinting at a destiny far grander and perhaps more tragic than mere service to the Greater Will. The Greater Will, in its infinite and inscrutable wisdom, had not left the Tarnished entirely to their own devices. Its emissaries, the two fingers, ancient colossal digits that served as conduits for the outer god's will, appointed finger maidens to guide these returning exiles. These maidens were meant to be the spiritual and practical guides for the Tarnished, helping them navigate the treacherous landscape and understand the arcane workings of the lands between. However, as became quickly apparent, many Tarnished arrived without their appointed maiden, their guides having met untimely ends or simply vanished. This absence was a significant hurdle, as without a finger maiden, a Tarnished could not convert the runes they acquired from vanquished foes into strength, thus effectively stymieing their progress. This is where Melina, with her enigmatic offer, became an indispensable, if unconventional, ally. Upon emerging from the Chapel of Anticipation, the newly awakened Tarnished, often disoriented and unsure of their purpose, would soon encounter a figure who would become infamous for his cutting remarks and thinly veiled contempt, Varro. This white-masked individual, shrouded in mystery and a distinct air of superiority, would mock the Tarnished's return, questioning their competence and their right to even tread upon the hallowed ground of the lands between. He would, however, point them towards their initial objective, Stormvale Castle. This formidable fortress, a testament to ancient power and current decay, was ruled by Godric the Grafted, one of the demigods who had inherited a shard of the shattered Elden Ring. Var's true allegiances and motives remained obscure at this early stage, but his initial guidance, however derisive, proved instrumental in setting the Tarnished on their path. Godric the Grafted, a grotesque and pathetic figure, was a direct descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and Marika herself. Despite his illustrious lineage, Godric was a weak and cowardly ruler, obsessed with power and the acquisition of strength through any means necessary. His epithet, the Grafted, referred to his horrifying practice of severing limbs from defeated warriors and grafting them onto his own body, a desperate and ultimately futile attempt to bolster his physical prowess and compensate for his inherent weakness. He holed himself up in Stormvale Castle, a once magnificent stronghold, now riddled with his macabre experiments and the stench of decay. His great rune, a fragment of the shattered Elden Ring, pulsed with a distorted, unholy power within him. The defeat of Godric was not just a matter of claiming a powerful artifact, it was a symbolic act, the first step in dismantling the fractured authority of the demigods and beginning the arduous process of mending the Elden Ring. The Tarnished, through sheer determination and often brutal combat, would overcome Godric, claiming his great rune, and in doing so, restoring a small, albeit significant fragment of the Elden Ring's former glory. This victory, however, was merely the first ripple in a much larger tide. Even as the Tarnished began their quest, another, far more subtle and cunning game was being played behind the scenes. Rani the Witch, a demigod daughter of Radagon and Renala, and a central figure in the Lunar Dynasty, began her covert manipulation of the Tarnished. Unlike the other demigods who clung to their great runes and their fragmented power, Rani harbored a profound disdain for the greater will and its rigid control over the lands between. Her ambition was not to become the Elden Lord, but to usher in an entirely new age, an age of stars, where the influence of the outer gods would be diminished, and the denizens of the lands between would be free to chart their own destinies. To achieve this, she needed to undermine the greater will and its chosen champions, the Tarnished, by subtly guiding them towards her own objectives. Her plan was intricate, involving ancient conspiracies and a willingness to defy cosmic order. To aid her in this complex endeavor, Rani had a loyal and formidable ally, Blod, her shadow. Shadows are unique beings, often appearing as towering lupin figures, bound to their demigod masters by the will of the Two Fingers. Bled, however, was unique in his unwavering devotion to Rani, even as her plans diverged from the greater will's intentions. The Tarnished would encounter Bled early in their journey, often through the cryptic pronouncements of Rani herself or her other servants. Blod, a skilled warrior and a keen observer, would aid the Tarnished in uncovering Rani's intricate plans, often without fully revealing the extent of her true ambitions. His presence served as a constant reminder of Rani's influence and the hidden currents flowing beneath the surface of the lands between. He would guide the Tarnished through treacherous areas, offer strategic advice, and even fight alongside them, all in service of Rani's ultimate goal. Meanwhile, in the grand magical halls of the Academy of Raya Lucaria, nestled within the shimmering lakes of Lurnia, resided Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. Once the revered Carian queen and a formidable sorceress, Renala had been shattered by the departure of her husband, Radagon, who had left her to become Marika's second consort. Now she lingered in a state of perpetual grief and delusion, cradling a great rune that pulsed with a gentle yet potent power. Her children, the students of the Academy, were in truth reborn through a process of magical rebirth, forever locked in a state of childlike innocence, protected by her sorrow. Renala, unlike the other demigods, did not actively seek to rule or wage war. Her power, though immense, was largely passive, focused on the preservation of her shattered world within the Academy. She was not a demigod in the same vein as Godric or Radon, as her great rune was not a direct shard of the Elden Ring, but rather a unique artifact reflecting her mastery of lunar magic. The Tarnished, in their relentless pursuit of great runes, would eventually confront Renala. The battle within the grand library of the Academy was a poignant affair, a clash not against malice, but against profound sorrow and a mother's desperate, albeit misguided, love. The Tarnished would ultimately defeat Renala, not by killing her, but by breaking her illusion of control over her reborn students, forcing her to confront the reality of her loss. This victory, while not a brutal conquest, allowed the Tarnished to gain access to her Great Rune, a powerful artifact that granted the ability to respect their attributes, a crucial boon for any adventurer in the lands between. This encounter with Renala further highlighted the diverse nature of the demigods and the varied ways in which the Elden Ring's power manifested. Far to the east, in the scorching wastes of Caelid, a different kind of tragedy unfolded. Radon, the Star Scourge, a demigod of immense power and once a revered general, had succumbed to the Scarlet Rot, a horrifying affliction spread by the outer god of rot. In his madness, Radon, with his colossal strength, held the very stars in stasis, preventing their natural movement across the sky. This act, born of a twisted sense of duty and a desire to protect the lands between from perceived cosmic threats, had a profound and unforeseen consequence. It prevented Rani's destiny from unfolding. Rani's fate, her very being, was tied to the movement of the stars, and Radon's cosmic imprisonment of them effectively halted her plans. His continued existence, therefore, became a major obstacle to Rani's ambitions. Recognizing the dire implications of Radon's continued existence, and perhaps subtly influenced by Rani's agents, a grand event was organized, the Radon Festival. This wasn't a celebration, but a solemn gathering of warriors and champions from across the lands between, united by a singular purpose, to defeat the mad demigod. Jaren, the enigmatic witch hunter and a former associate of Rani, presided over the festival, summoning Tarnished and other brave souls to face the insurmountable challenge. The festival was a brutal affair, a test of strength and courage against a demigod who, even in his madness, retained much of his formidable power. The Tarnished, drawn by the promise of a great rune and the allure of such a grand confrontation, would participate in this epic struggle. The Tarnished, alongside other brave combatants, would eventually defeat Radon. This monumental victory, achieved through a combination of skill, perseverance, and perhaps a touch of divine intervention, had immediate and far-reaching consequences. With Radon's defeat, the stars were freed from his gravitational prison, resuming their celestial dance across the night sky. This cosmic liberation was a critical step for Rani, allowing her fate to progress and her intricate plans to unfold as she had intended. The defeat of Radon, therefore, was not just another step in the Tarnished's quest for great runes. It was a pivotal moment in the larger narrative of the lands between, directly impacting the ambitions of one of its most powerful and cunning demigods. Meanwhile, in the volcanic depths of Mount Gelmir, a different kind of horror was brewing. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, another demigod child of Marika, had embraced a monstrous path. Driven by a desire to defy the Erdtree and the greater will, he had merged with a colossal serpent, becoming a grotesque, blasphemous entity. Within Volcano Manor, his stronghold, Rykard devoured warriors, both loyal and unwitting, in a perverse ritual to grow his power and fuel his rebellion against the Golden Order. His philosophy was one of absolute defiance, a rejection of all divine authority, and a hunger for limitless power through the absorption of others. His great rune pulsed with a vile, corrupted energy, a testament to his blasphemous transformation. The horrors of Volcano Manor and the monstrous form of Rykard represented a stark contrast to the more traditional forms of power sought by other demigods, hinting at darker, more ancient forces at play within the lands between. The Tarnished, having navigated the treacherous paths leading to Volcano Manor, finally confronted Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy. This demigod, having merged with the god devouring serpent, presented a grotesque challenge, embodying the very defiance of the Golden Order. The Tarnished, utilizing the Serpent Hunter Spear, a weapon specifically designed to combat such colossal foes, engaged Rykard in a brutal struggle within his lava filled lair. This confrontation was not merely a battle of strength, but a clash of ideologies. Rykard's ambition to devour the very gods and ascend to a new form of power stood in stark opposition to the Tarnished's quest to mend the fractured Elden Ring. With Rykard's defeat, his blasphemous ambitions were brought to a definitive end, preventing the further spread of his heretical influence across the lands between. Following this significant victory, the Tarnished turned their attention towards Lendel, the royal capital, a city steeped in the history and power of the Golden Order. Here, Morgott, the Veiled Monarch, stood as the unyielding guardian of the Erd Tree, the colossal golden tree that symbolized the Greater Will's dominion. Morgott, a demigod of Omen lineage, bore the burden of his cursed heritage, yet fiercely defended the very order that shunned him. His devotion to the Erd Tree and his unwavering loyalty to the Golden Order were absolute, making him a formidable and tragic figure. The battle against Morgott was a testament to his strength and resolve, a desperate defense of a crumbling ideal. Yet even his immense power was insufficient to halt the relentless advance of the Tarnished. Upon his defeat, a shocking truth was revealed. Morgott, the Veiled Monarch, was in fact Margit, the Fell Omen, the very first formidable foe the Tarnished had encountered upon their arrival in Limgrave. This revelation underscored the cyclical nature of their journey and the hidden complexities of the demigod lineage, highlighting Morgott's dual role as both a gatekeeper and a tragic outcast. With Morgott vanquished and the path to the Erd Tree seemingly clear, the Tarnished sought guidance from their two fingers, the ethereal beings that served as intermediaries between the greater will and its chosen champions. However, the two fingers delivered a disconcerting message. The Erd Tree was sealed, its golden gates impenetrable. To proceed, the Tarnished would need to commit a cardinal sin, an act explicitly forbidden by the Golden Order, burning the Erd Tree itself. This shocking directive left the Tarnished with a profound dilemma, for such an act went against the very tenets of the Order they were ostensibly meant to restore. The two fingers, in their cryptic pronouncements, instructed the Tarnished to seek the flame of frenzy, a primordial and destructive force that promised to reduce all to a single, chaotic unity. This alternative path, however, carried with it the terrifying risk of succumbing to the madness of the frenzied flame, forever altering the fate of the lands between. It was at this critical juncture that Melina, the enigmatic maiden who had guided the Tarnished throughout their journey, made a profound and selfless offer. Recognizing the desperate need to progress and the dire consequences of the frenzied flame, she offered herself as kindling to burn the Erd Tree, a sacrifice that would allow the Tarnished to bypass the cardinal sin and continue their quest without succumbing to the destructive influence of the flame of frenzy. Melina's decision was born of a deep understanding of the stakes involved and a personal conviction to see the Tarnished's journey through to its intended conclusion. Her sacrifice was not merely an act of immolation, but a profound act of faith in the tarnished, a belief that they could indeed mend the Elden Ring and bring a new order to the shattered lands. This act of selflessness underscored the complex moral landscape of the lands between, where even the most righteous paths demanded unthinkable sacrifices. With the Erd tree now ablaze, its golden leaves consumed by the flames, the path to the true heart of the Elden Ring was finally revealed. However, the journey was far from over. The Tarnished were transported to Farum Azula, a crumbling ancient city suspended in a timeless vortex, a place where the very fabric of reality seemed to unravel. Here, they were to confront Malekith, the Black Blade, the shadow-bound beast of Queen Marika, and the guardian of destined death. Malekith, imbued with the rune of death, held the power to truly kill demigods, a power that had been sealed away to prevent further chaos after the Night of the Black Knives. His presence in Farum Azula was a testament to the immense significance of his role as the keeper of the ultimate end. The battle against Malekith was a ferocious and desperate struggle, a clash against a being whose very existence embodied the finality of life. His attacks, imbued with the power of destined death, inflicted grievous wounds that sapped the very life force of his opponents. The Tarnished, through sheer determination and skill, ultimately prevailed against Malekith. With his defeat, destined death was unleashed upon the lands between, a cataclysmic event that fundamentally altered the nature of existence. The power to truly die, once sealed away, was now free, weakening the Erd Tree's defenses and further unraveling the Golden Order's grip on reality. This release of destined death was a pivotal moment, signifying the irreversible decline of the old order and the dawn of a new era. The very concept of immortality, once a cornerstone of the demigod's power, was now shattered, paving the way for a true end to their endless struggle. The consequences of this act resonated throughout the lands between, as the fear of true death once again permeated the hearts of its inhabitants. Finally, with destined death unleashed and the Erd Tree's defenses compromised, the Tarnished were able to enter the Erd Tree itself, venturing into its sacred depths. Here, within the very heart of the Golden Order, they discovered Queen Marika the Eternal, the progenitor of the demigods and the architect of the Golden Order, imprisoned within. Her shattered form, still bound to the Elden Ring, was a tragic testament to the Greater Will's cruel manipulation and the devastating consequences of her own rebellion. Marika's imprisonment was not merely physical, but a spiritual one, her will subsumed by the very power she sought to control. Her presence within the Erd Tree revealed the ultimate fate of those who defied the Greater Will, even its most favored champions. As the Tarnished approached Marika, a profound transformation occurred. Radagon, Marika's other self, emerged to defend the Elden Ring as its final guardian. This revelation unveiled the true nature of Marika's being, her dual identity as both Queen Marika and Radagon, the Golden Order's champion and consort to Renala. Radagon, a being of immense power and unwavering devotion to the Golden Order, stood as that ultimate obstacle, a reflection of the very order the Tarnished sought to either mend or shatter. The battle against Radagon was a climactic confrontation, a struggle against the embodiment of the Golden Order's might and its desperate attempt to preserve its dominion. His attacks, imbued with the power of holy light and the fundamental principles of the Golden Order, were a testament to his unwavering resolve. The fight was not merely a test of combat prowess, but a philosophical clash pitting the Tarnished's will against the very foundation of the lands between. Through arduous combat, the Tarnished ultimately defeated Radagon, shattering the Elden Ring's remnants. This act was not merely a physical destruction, but a symbolic breaking of the greater will's control, a severing of the ancient pact that had bound the lands between for millennia. With Radagon's defeat, the last vestiges of the Golden Order's direct power were dismantled, leaving a void that would soon be filled by a new age. The shattering of the Elden Ring's remnants was a moment of profound consequence, signifying the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. It was a testament to the Tarnished's unwavering determination and their ability to overcome even the most formidable guardians of the old world. However, the journey was not yet complete. As Radagon fell, a new and even more primordial entity emerged, the Elden Beast, a manifestation of the greater will itself. This colossal, ethereal creature, born from the very essence of the Elden Ring, was the greater will's ultimate defense, a living embodiment of its cosmic power and unwavering control. The Elden Beast was not a demigod or a creature of flesh and blood, but a pure expression of divine will, a force beyond mortal comprehension. The final confrontation against the Elden Beast was a cosmic struggle, a battle against the very essence of the greater will's dominion over the lands between. Its attacks, imbued with the power of the cosmos and the fundamental forces of creation, were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The fight was a test of the Tarnished's will, their resolve to defy the very order of the universe and carve out their own destiny. With immense effort and unwavering courage, the Tarnished defeated the Elden Beast, ending the greater will's direct control over the lands between. This final victory was the culmination of their arduous journey, a triumph over the cosmic forces that had shaped the fate of the world for countless ages. The defeat of the Elden Beast signified a profound shift in power, a severing of the celestial strings that had long manipulated the inhabitants of the lands between. It was a moment of liberation, a chance for the world to finally forge its own destiny, free from the dictates of an unseen, all-powerful entity. The victory was not merely a personal triumph for the Tarnished, but a seismic event that reverberated throughout the entire cosmos, marking the end of an ancient era of divine intervention. Having overcome every obstacle and defeated every guardian, the Tarnished stood at the precipice of a new age, empowered to choose an ending, thereby restoring order to the lands between in their chosen manner. This was the ultimate purpose of their journey, the moment where their actions would irrevocably shape the future. The choices presented to the Tarnished were varied and profound, each offering a distinct vision for the future of the lands between. They could choose to become the Elden Lord, ushering in a new era under the Golden Order, perhaps a renewed and purified version, or a more traditional continuation of its principles. This path represented a restoration of a semblance of the old order, albeit under new leadership. Alternatively, the Tarnished could choose to mend the Elden Ring with the Rune of Death, bringing about the Age of Duskborn, an era where true death would once again be a natural part of the cycle of life. This ending, influenced by Fia, the deathbed companion, sought to integrate death back into the world, acknowledging its essential role in the grand tapestry of existence. It was a path that sought balance, recognizing that life and death were two sides of the same coin, and that the suppression of death had only led to stagnation and suffering. This choice, represented a departure from the Golden Order's fear of death, embracing its natural place in the world. Another option was to usher in the age of the frenzied flame, embracing the destructive chaos of the primordial flame and reducing all to a single, unified entity. This path, influenced by the Three Fingers, represented a radical rejection of all existing orders, a desire to burn away all distinctions and suffering in a cleansing fire. It was a terrifying yet tempting prospect for those who had witnessed the endless pain and strife of the lands between. This ending was the ultimate act of rebellion, a complete dismantling of all established norms and an embrace of primordial chaos. Furthermore, the Tarnished could choose to bring about the Age of Order, a new era where the fundamental principles of the Golden Order were refined and perfected, eliminating the flaws that had led to its downfall. This ending, influenced by the Gold Mask and Brother Corin, sought to mend the Elden Ring in a way that would prevent future corruption and ensure a more just and stable order. It was a path of intellectual and spiritual refinement, seeking to create a perfect, unyielding order that would prevent the cyclical nature of chaos and decay. This choice represented a philosophical evolution of the Golden Order, addressing its inherent weaknesses and striving for a more perfect system. Or the Tarnished could choose to usher in the Age of Stars, aligning the lands between with the cosmic order of the stars and bringing about a new age guided by the moon and its cold, distant wisdom. This path, influenced by Rani the Witch, sought to break free from the Greater Will's influence entirely, establishing a new order based on the principles of fate and the cosmic dance of the stars. It was a profound shift in cosmic alignment, moving away from the terrestrial influence of the Erd Tree and embracing the vast, mysterious power of the cosmos. This ending represented a complete rejection of the Golden Order and a bold step into an unknown, yet potentially more enlightened future. Each choice carried profound implications, not just for the lands between, but for the very fabric of existence. The Tarnished's decision would determine the course of history, shaping the lives of countless generations and defining the nature of power, life, and death in this new era. Their actions, born of struggle and sacrifice, had brought them to this ultimate crossroads where the fate of a world rested in their hands. The weight of these choices was immense, reflecting the culmination of their entire journey and the profound impact they had made on the shattered world. With the chosen ending enacted, the Age of the Tarnished concluded, marking a new era shaped irrevocably by the Tarnished's actions. The lands between, once trapped in a cycle of stagnation and conflict, was now set on a new path, its future defined by the choices of a single, unblinking champion. Whether it was an age of renewed order, cosmic alignment, or even destructive chaos, the world would forever bear the imprint of the Tarnished's journey. This new age, born from the ashes of the old, was a testament to the power of individual will and the transformative potential of a single, determined soul. The legacy of the Tarnished would echo through time, a reminder of the profound impact one individual could have on the destiny of an entire world. The struggles, sacrifices, and ultimate triumphs of the Tarnished had brought about a definitive end to one era and the uncertain yet hopeful beginning of another. The cycle of the Elden Ring, once seemingly unbreakable, had been shattered and reformed, creating a new tapestry of fate for the lands between. And so, we arrive at the pivotal turning point, the event that irrevocably reshaped the lands between, and set in motion the calamitous era known as the Shattering. Our timeline now brings us to the Night of the Black Knives, an epical betrayal that unfurled during the very early stages of the Shattering, acting as both a catalyst and a consequence of the fracturing Golden Order. This night of infamy, steeped in shadow and deceit, was meticulously orchestrated by none other than Rani the Witch, an Empyrean, a demigod chosen by the Two Fingers to potentially succeed Marika as a god. Rani, however, harbored a profound disdain for the Greater Will, the enigmatic outer god that guides the Golden Order, and sought to liberate herself and the lands between from its suffocating influence. Her ambition led her to forge a clandestine alliance with the Black Knife Assassins, a shadowy cadre of female Numen warriors, kin to Marika herself, who had sworn allegiance to her. These assassins, known for their swift, silent strikes and their distinctive curved blades, became Rani's instruments in a plot of unprecedented audacity. The core of Rani's conspiracy revolved around the acquisition of a fragment of the Rune of Death, also known as Destined Death. This primordial power, once sealed away by Queen Marika after Malekith, the Black Blade, defeated its former wielder, the Glomide Queen, was the ultimate deterrent against demigod mortality. With Destined Death locked away, demigods were effectively immortal, their souls unable to truly perish. Rani understood that to truly break free from the Greater Will's established order, the very concept of demigod immortality had to be shattered. To this end, she conspired with the Black Knife Assassins to steal a fragment of this potent rune from its custodian, Malekith. Malekith, Marika's shadow-bound beast and half-brother, was bound by an unbreakable oath to safeguard Destined Death within his blade, the Black Blade. The logistics of such a theft were, by any measure, staggering, a testament to Rani's cunning and the assassin's stealth. It is believed, though not explicitly stated, that the assassins, with their Numen heritage and their innate connection to the shadows, possessed a unique capability to navigate the forbidden paths and wards, protecting Malekith's lair, the crumbling Farum Azula, a floating city outside of time. Their mastery of stealth, honed over generations, allowed them to bypass the formidable defenses and the vigilant watch of the beast clergyman, Malekith's guise. The precise method of the theft remains shrouded in mystery, but the outcome is undeniable. A sliver of the Rune of Death was successfully extracted from Malekith's blade. This fragment, though small, contained enough of Destined Death's power to be wielded with devastating effect. Upon obtaining this stolen fragment, Rani, with her profound understanding of ancient sorcery and her innate Empyrean power, imbued the Black Knives, the very weapons of her conspirators, with the power of Destined Death. This was a critical step, transforming ordinary, albeit expertly crafted, blades into instruments capable of inflicting true, permanent death upon even the most powerful demigods. The infusion of Destined Death into these blades meant that any wound inflicted by them would not merely cause physical harm, but would also sever the victim's connection to the Erd Tree's grace, preventing their rebirth and ensuring the absolute annihilation of their soul. This was the ultimate weapon against the Golden Order's established immortality. The assassins, now armed with these death-imbued blades, became the ultimate arbiters of fate, capable of delivering permanent oblivion. With their newly empowered weapons, the Black Knife Assassins, under Rani's direction, launched their devastating assault. Under the impenetrable cover of night, they infiltrated the heavily fortified capital city of Landel, the very heart of the Golden Order. The Night of the Black Knives was not merely an assassination, but a meticulously planned, large scale infiltration designed to strike at the very core of Marika's dynasty. The assassins, with their unparalleled stealth and their knowledge of Landal's hidden passages and secret routes, bypassed the formidable defenses of the royal capital. Their movements were swift, silent, and coordinated, a testament to their training and the precision of Rani's planning. The city, usually bustling with activity, fell into an unnatural quiet as the assassins moved through its shadowed streets and grand halls, their presence a chilling harbinger of the tragedy to come. Their primary target was Godwin the Golden, the firstborn son of Queen Marika and Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Godwin was not only a beloved figure, renowned for his valor and charisma, but also a symbol of the Golden Order's strength and prosperity. His death would send shockwaves throughout the lands between, destabilizing the very foundations of Marika's rule. The assassins ambushed Godwin in his chambers within the royal capital, a place thought to be impenetrable, a sanctuary for the golden lineage. The attack was swift and brutal, leaving Godwin no chance to defend himself against the coordinated assault of multiple death-imbued blades. The precision of the strike, the element of surprise, and the potency of destined death ensured his immediate demise. This act of regicide, an unprecedented sacrilege, marked the true beginning of the Golden Order's unraveling. However, the Night of the Black Knives was not a simple assassination. It was a ritualistic killing, carefully orchestrated by Rani to achieve a very specific outcome. Rani's ritual ensured that Godwin was killed in soul only, while her own Empyrean body was slain simultaneously. This dual death, a deliberate act of self-sacrifice and ritual murder, was central to Rani's grand scheme. By having her own body killed at the very same moment Godwin's soul was extinguished, Rani effectively circumvented the greater will's control over her fate. She sought to discard her flesh, her physical form, which was bound to the two fingers and the greater will, while preserving her soul. This act of soul death, body death for Godwin, and body death, soul preservation for Rani, was a profound manipulation of destined death's power. It allowed Rani to escape the fate of an Empyrean, to reject the path laid out for her by the greater will, and to pursue her own destiny, free from the dictates of an outer god. Her physical form, now lifeless, became a vessel for her discarded Empyrean flesh, while her soul transferred to a new, doll-like body, a vessel of her own choosing. The immediate consequence of this ritual was the tragic fate of Godwin. His soul perished, utterly annihilated by the power of destined death, leaving his physical body an empty husk. Yet due to the unique nature of Rani's ritual, his body remained alive, albeit in a grotesque and unnatural state. This was not a true death, but a perversion of life and death, a state of undeath that would have profound and horrifying ramifications. Godwin's body, though soulless, continued to exist, slowly but inexorably beginning its transformation into an abomination, a living monument to the Night of the Black Knives and the corruption it unleashed. This state of being dead, but not truly dead, was a direct result of destined death being used in a manner that defied its natural purpose, creating a paradox that would plague the lands between for centuries. From Godwin's corpse, buried deep beneath the capital of Landel, a horrifying new form of corruption began to sprout, the death root. This parasitic growth, a manifestation of the unnatural death Godwin suffered, began to spread its tendrils through the very roots of the Erd tree itself. The Erd Tree, the symbol of the Golden Order's divine power and the source of all grace, was now being infected from within by the very death it was meant to transcend. The Death Root, a physical embodiment of destined death's perversion, began to spread its influence throughout the lands between, giving rise to creatures known as those who live in death, beings whose souls had been touched by the Death Root's corruption, preventing them from truly dying or truly living. This insidious spread of Deathroot was a direct consequence of Godwin's unique death, a festering wound at the heart of the world, poisoning the very source of life and grace. The assassination of Godwin the Golden, the beloved demigod, sent shockwaves through the entirety of the lands between, but its most profound impact was upon Queen Marika herself. Overwhelmed by an unbearable grief for her firstborn son and consumed by a furious rage at the betrayal, Marika, the very deity who had established the Golden Order, committed an unthinkable act. She shattered the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring, the physical manifestation of the Golden Order's laws and the source of all grace, was torn asunder by Marika's divine will, its fragments scattering across the lands between. This cataclysmic event, known as the Shattering, was a direct response to the Night of the Black Knives, a desperate act of despair and fury from a grieving mother and a betrayed god. Marika's act of shattering the Elden Ring was not a calculated move, but an emotional outburst, a testament to the profound impact Godwin's death had upon her. Her actions plunged the lands between into an era of unprecedented chaos and war. With the Elden Ring shattered, its great runes, fragments of its immense power, were scattered across the land, each imbued with a portion of its divine authority. This created a power vacuum, and the remaining demigods, Marika's children and stepchildren, immediately scrambled to claim these great runes, each believing themselves to be the rightful successor to Marika and the next Elden Lord. The Golden Order, already fractured by the Night of the Black Knives, now splintered completely, as brother turned against brother and sister against sister in a brutal war for dominance. The age of peace and prosperity under the Golden Order was over, replaced by an era of endless conflict and bloodshed, all stemming from the events of that fateful night. The demigods, once united under Marika's rule, now became warring factions, each vying for supremacy, their ambition fueled by the allure of the great runes. For Rani, the Night of the Black Knives was not merely an act of revenge or a means to an end, but the true beginning of her rebellion against the greater will. By discarding her Empyrean flesh, her physical body, she effectively severed her connection to the Two Fingers and the greater will's influence. This act of self-mutilation, a ritualistic rejection of her predetermined fate, allowed her to pursue her own path, a path of freedom and self-determination. Her ambition was to establish an age of the stars, a new order where the influence of outer gods would be diminished, and the lands between would be guided by the cold, indifferent stars. The Night of the Black Knives was the pivotal moment in her personal journey, the point of no return where she fully embraced her role as a rebel and a revolutionary. In the aftermath of their audacious act, the Black Knife assassins scattered, their mission accomplished, but their fate uncertain. Some were hunted relentlessly by Malekith, the Black Blade, who, upon realizing that a fragment of destined death had been stolen from him and used to kill a demigod, was consumed by a righteous fury. Malekith, bound by his oath to Marika to protect destined death, saw the assassin's actions as a profound betrayal and a direct challenge to his sacred duty. He pursued them relentlessly, seeking to reclaim the stolen fragment and punish those who dared to wield its power. This pursuit led to many of the Black Knife assassins being hunted down and slain, their bodies often found bearing the marks of Malekith's devastating blade. Others, however, managed to evade his wrath, disappearing into the shadows, their fates unknown, their legacy forever intertwined with the Knight of the Black Knives. Amidst the chaos and sorrow that followed, a new and unsettling phenomenon began to emerge. Fia, the deathbed companion, a mysterious woman with a profound connection to death, became inexplicably drawn to Godwin's corpse. Fia, an individual who embraced the concept of those who live in death, saw Godwin's unique state not as an abomination, but as a tragic figure deserving of solace and comfort. She sought to commune with his lingering essence, to embrace the death that lives, and to find a way to grant him a true, peaceful death. Her actions, though seemingly benevolent, were also a testament to the unsettling shift in the understanding of death that the Knight of the Black Knives had ushered in. Her presence near Godwin's corrupted form further highlighted the profound impact of his death, drawing attention to the perversion of destined death and the emergence of a new, unsettling form of undeath. The re-entry of destined death into the world, albeit in a corrupted and fragmented form, also signaled the resurgence of the Dusk-Eyed Queen's legacy. The Gloam-Eyed Queen, a mysterious figure from ancient times, was the original wielder of destined death, leading a faction known as the Godskin Apostles who sought to slay gods. Her defeat by Malekith and the subsequent sealing of destined death had marked the end of her reign. However, with the Knight of the Black Knives and the reintroduction of destined death into the cycle of life and death, her ancient power and philosophy began to resurface, inspiring new adherents and raising questions about the true nature of death and divinity. The existence of the Godskin Apostles, still active in the lands between, served as a grim reminder of the Dusk-Eyed Queen's enduring influence and the potential for destined death to once again be wielded against the gods. Years later, in the shattered lands between, the valiant tarnished knight Rogier would dedicate himself to investigating the enigmatic events of the Knight of the Black Knives. Driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to understand the root cause of the world's suffering, Rogier meticulously gathered clues, piecing together fragments of information from various sources. His investigations would eventually lead him to uncover the shocking truth. The Knight of the Black Knives was not merely an act of random violence, but a carefully orchestrated conspiracy with Ronnie the Witch and the Black Knife assassins at its heart. Rogier's research, though ultimately leading to his tragic demise, would provide crucial insights into the motivations behind the assassination and the far-reaching consequences it had unleashed upon the lands between. His findings would further solidify the understanding of the Knight of the Black Knives as the pivotal moment that irrevocably altered the course of history, plunging the world into an era of endless conflict and widespread corruption. This, then, is the first part of the story of the Knight of the Black Knives, a night of betrayal, death, and profound transformation that forever altered the destiny of the lands between. The Golden Order, once the bedrock of societal faith, found itself utterly incapable of offering a coherent explanation for Godwin's inexplicable demise. The very foundation of their power, the Erd Tree itself, was seen as fallible, its divine protection evidently insufficient against such a heinous act. This profound failure to account for the death of a demigod, a son of Marika and Radagon, began to erode the unwavering faith that had sustained the Golden Order for centuries. The populace, accustomed to the Erd Tree's omnipresent blessings and the unwavering authority of the Golden Order, now faced a reality where even the most sacred figures could be struck down by unseen forces. This crisis of faith was not merely a theological debate, but a practical unraveling of the social fabric, as the populace questioned the efficacy of their prayers and the legitimacy of their rulers. The implications were vast, extending beyond mere spiritual doubt to a fundamental challenge of the established political and social hierarchy. The Golden Order's inability to provide answers, to offer solace or retribution, left a gaping wound in the collective psyche of the lands between, a wound that would fester and contribute to the widespread disillusionment that characterized the ensuing shattering. In the immediate aftermath of her horrifying deed, Rani's spirit, now untethered from her original body, fled to her pre-prepared puppet body. This act of self-mutilation, a necessary evil to escape the dominion of the greater will and the fate it intended for her, was a desperate measure. She sought refuge in the towering isolation of her Liurnian tower, a place of contemplation and arcane study where she could evade the inevitable retribution that would surely come from the Golden Order and the Two Fingers, who would undoubtedly perceive her actions as an unforgivable betrayal. Her puppet body, a vessel crafted with meticulous care, allowed her to retain her consciousness and her formidable magical abilities, albeit in a form that was no longer her own. This new existence, while offering a measure of safety, also served as a constant reminder of the drastic steps she had taken and the irreversible path she had chosen. The tower, an ancient and formidable structure, became her sanctuary, a place where she could plot her next moves, unburdened by the physical constraints of her former life, yet haunted by the echoes of her past. The very act of inhabiting a puppet body, a construct of wood and magic, symbolized her rejection of the organic, natural order dictated by the Erd Tree and the Greater Will, further cementing her rebellious stance. Meanwhile, Marika's shadow, the formidable Malekith, the Black Blade, found himself increasingly unstable, consumed by a profound sense of failure after his inability to protect the Rune of Death. This sacred artifact, entrusted to him by Queen Marika herself, was meant to be an unassailable safeguard, its power contained to prevent the natural cycle of life and death from being disrupted. Its theft and subsequent misuse for the Knight of the Black Knives represented a catastrophic breach of his sacred duty, a personal and cosmic failure that weighed heavily on his ancient soul. The very essence of his being, intertwined with the Rune of Death, was now in disarray, his mind tormented by the consequences of its release. His once unwavering resolve began to falter, his immense power becoming erratic, a reflection of the chaos unleashed upon the lands between. The guilt and shame of his perceived inadequacy gnawed at him, transforming the once steadfast protector into a figure consumed by internal strife. This instability manifested not just in his demeanor, but in the very fabric of his being, foreshadowing the tragic fate that awaited him, forever bound to the very power he failed to guard. The loss of the Rune of Death was not merely a political or magical event, but a deeply personal tragedy for Malekith, stripping him of his purpose and plunging him into a spiral of despair. The Black Knife Catacombs, a labyrinthine network of subterranean passages and forgotten tombs,